Chapter 577. The hurricane several thousand kilometers away continued to approach the archipelago region. Luo Nan's mind had already reached the shore a step earlier. It continued to expand forward with a steady momentum. But the current expansion already appeared to Luo Nan as a different kind of law. The root of this expansion was not at the forefront. Instead, it was at the core of this expanding force. In other words, Luo Nan himself. Luo Nan's figure congealed on the podium. But the structure of space and time around him was like a projection that was hard to distinguish between real and fake. Layers and layers appeared with Luo Nan at the center. This was the bubble that he had demonstrated to the participants before. It symbolized the cage of humanity. Looking at it from this angle, everyone in the circular conference room, everyone in the Shangding building, everyone in Xia City, and even everyone within the range of Luo Nan's senses were wrapped within a bubble. The only differences were in terms of stability and range of coverage. Of course, the shape of each bubble was different as well. The bubbles of the vast majority of people, or rather, the majority of people, could collapse and regenerate at any time. But for a short period of time, the bubbles would warp and transform into all sorts of complex shapes. The reason for this was the pressure of other bubbles and even deeper environmental conditions. Right now, Luo Nan's bubble was one of the greatest sources of pressure for the people present. This bubble was far too enormous compared to everyone else. The stability of the core region far exceeded that of everyone else. So much so that the 1,400 people in the conference room were all suppressed to varying degrees. And under the effect of the group consciousness that had already been finalized, certain aspects converged to form the force field of the ring of blood and will together. But this did not mean that Luo Nan's own bubble could do as it pleased. Not to mention the powerful pressure from the 5 extraordinaries around him, the seemingly ordinary things around him. The podium, the circular conference room, the Shangding building. Everything he sensed on the plane of reality was simply a part of an incomparably enormous bubble. That incomparably enormous bubble was the environment of this world. It was the embodiment of space-time power that leaned more towards the material plane. Luo Nan faintly sensed the indescribably complex curvature of this space-time. In other words, it was tantamount to feeling the tiny traces of the boundless universe added to this place. Such a realization was undoubtedly the manifestation of his observational ability advancing a step further. It was in this context that new discoveries inevitably arrived. Luo Nan noticed that there were a few areas worthy of special attention on the complex curved surface of spacetime. The magnitude of the impact was not something that could be caused by any small bubble. Furthermore, there was a relatively fleeting point behind a certain massively warped region. It was similar to the basketball team of extraordinaries that hovered in the night sky of Xia City. From behind the warped and deformed structure, it radiated powerful stimulative information that made him unhappy. It was almost certain that this was a transcendent. Luo Nan's soul cloak covered an enormous area of effect, but it wasn't strange at all. Because part of it was based on the condensation ring, according to the different activity levels of water molecules, the progress in the ocean was faster, and the progress in the inland was slower. However, it almost covered the entire East Asian continent and half of the Pacific Ocean. It was just that Luo Nan knew that he was unable to handle the enormous amount of information within. He didn't investigate, didn't notice, and didn't do anything. He just maintained a normal state of attention towards a few sensitive areas. In such a vast area, no matter how rare extraordinaries were, it was still possible to encounter a few. But the problem was that the distance of this stimulation point was too close. Luo Nan's first reaction was that it was within the range of Xia City, but that wasn't right. The fuzzy judgment of being very far yet very close was truly nauseating. Luo Nan had no choice but to split a portion of his mind to pay attention to this point. After a few consecutive rounds of stimulation, he filled in more and more sensory information in an attempt to restore the information. As the constructed information became more and more complete, there was a sudden jolt. All sorts of one-sided information instantly combined in front of the answer that already existed, returning to their respective positions. In the end, what was restored in the domain of perception was the astral winds and clouds that spanned thousands of kilometers, as well as the blood-colored ape that flew back and forth. The cloud world. So naturally, the target that gave him negative stimulation also appeared, Gong Qi. This Deputy Secretary-General of the Society, who had fallen into the clouds, was undoubtedly a psychic extraordinaire. He was a powerful person that stood at the apex of the inner world. Gong Qi floated within the astral winds of the clouds. His expression was grave and stern. It looked like he had yet to find a way to break through this cloud labyrinth. On the other hand, Luo Nan had already extended his consciousness to his headquarters. If Luo Nan were to use physical distance to discuss the situation, then Luo Nan's current situation was already difficult for Gong Qi to reach. Well, this was just a joke at the moment. But Luo Nan still remembered that Her Majesty Empress Wu had a request. She wanted him to achieve what was known as the enemy of 10,000. Luo Nan wanted to completely incorporate the situation he faced into the framework of formatting theory. He wanted to consider all sorts of factors and calculate all sorts of conditions. It was as if he was conducting a large-scale battle to solve a large problem. Now it was like this. It seemed that he already had an opportunity to include Gong Qi. Luo Nan wasn't prepared to act blindly without thinking before he could completely figure out the train of thought of this strategic plan. But there was an observation result before his eyes. It was impossible to ignore it no matter what. Luo Nan was certain that there was a similar type of bubble on the most complex and obvious curved surface of spacetime that he could observe. The bubble seemed to be a bit smaller, but it collided with the bubble, crisscrossing and deforming. It formed an indescribable shape, but it was hard to separate it as a whole. Similar collisions seemed to be occurring in various directions. But the main problem was that Luo Nan's consciousness followed the soul cloak and extended outwards. It followed the inconceivably warped surface. It seemed as though it was effortless for Luo Nan to move from one spacetime bubble to another spacetime bubble. The other spacetime was none other than the cloud world. Luo Nan's consciousness didn't go through the void corridor structure designed by his mother. He actually leaped over the barrier of spacetime and entered that marvelous world. Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. He couldn't help but consider. Was the warped scene he saw before him real? Was it normal and stable? What sort of meaning did it represent? There was some logic that could be deduced behind the newest observation result. It couldn't be ignored. It could be seen that on one hand, the atmospheric bubble contained the small bubbles. It delineated the rules and laws of existence, forming a livable environment. But on the other hand, the atmospheric bubble suppressed the small bubbles. The small bubbles also affected the atmospheric bubble. The small bubbles also pushed and warped against each other. From beginning to end, a kind of repulsive force was manifested. This was the relationship between the I and the not me that Luo Nan spoke of earlier. And this relationship could still be established by expanding outwards from a sociological perspective. It was like anchored a new argument for his grandfather's theory of the triple format of self, society, and heaven and earth. Luo Nan had yet to completely straighten out the logical relationship within, but he received this new level of information. The depth of his understanding of the range covered by the soul cloak increased by a large margin. Correspondingly, the amount of information contained instantly increased by several times. No, at the very least by several tens or even hundreds of times. Luo Nan lacked an accurate estimate of this. He still followed the established model and perceptual precision to analyze the situation of the relevant region, especially the problems related to the cloud world and the palace enlightenment. And the enormous flow of information squeezed in the next instant. It nearly stuffed his brain to the point of bursting. It was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded in Luo Nan's brain. The physiological fusing mechanism was forcefully activated. For 2 seconds, his mind was practically blank. His reaction to the outside world had already come to a complete standstill. It must be known that aside from clairvoyance around the Chan City archipelago, he was also fighting against Ghost Eye in the Abyss region. The pressure was already quite great. If not for the fact that the force field of the Ring of Blood Will had stabilized, and the few consciousnesses within the force field had been stimulated to enter a semi-awakened state, it would have been equivalent to having a few more maintenance personnel. Otherwise, the space bastion might have exploded on the spot. No matter how big Luo Nan's heart was, he was shocked into a cold sweat upon encountering this sort of situation. Ghost Eye was quite astute. He sensed a large fluctuation in the defenses of the Blood Intent Ring and immediately pulled back. He took advantage of the situation to end this confrontation, which no longer had any significance of verification. 500 kilometers away, Ghost Eye let out a breath of relief. The twisted handprints of his hands dispersed, and the sinister force field that nearly caused all the passengers on the luxurious cruise ship to collapse slowly disappeared. At this time, if the beautiful host, Dan E., could ask, "Mr. Ghost Eye, how did your bet go?" then the program would be considered complete. But the problem was that Dan E. was able to sit steadily in her chair. Her body and consciousness were completely stiff. Though it wasn't as exaggerated as a certain person's claim that she was scared to the point of pissing herself, it was really difficult for her to continue hosting the program. Therefore, the audience of the inner world could only stare blankly as Ghost Eye slowly withdrew his power. He muttered to himself and put on a face that was neither happy nor angry to entice the imagination of everyone. Ree, who was currently cruising in the wind and rain, couldn't help but fantasize about whether or not Ghost Eye had given Luo Nan a sneak attack and left a fatal hidden wound or something. There seemed to be some problems with Luo Nan's state in the last few seconds. The red and white color of the blood on his face was extremely obvious. Before Ree could finish her thoughts, the car had already taken a detour from the coastal highway and entered a short-distance undersea tunnel that required an extremely high level of authority. This tunnel had undergone a special design. It used expensive special glass as its main body, achieving the effects of a single mirror and limited invisibility. Looking out from the inside of the tunnel, one could directly see the gloomy undersea world around the island. Looking in from the outside, one could only see a turbid turbulence. There were no traces of artificial construction. After passing through this tunnel, one would arrive at a group of small uninhabited islands and reefs that headquarters had specially opened up for closed-door cultivation. This was the legacy left behind by the eruption of a local volcano during the Third World War. Though the geological environment wasn't stable, it was extremely suitable for ability users of higher realms to cultivate and comprehend. It was said that it would yield twice the result with half the effort. Chapter 578. Even if Ree was a grade B powerhouse, she still felt awkward and depressed that she was asking for trouble in such a hurricane, especially during the tide rush period. For a second or two, he almost wanted to turn around and go back. But when she saw Luo Nan's clearly childish face within the video system, Luo Nan's face was calm and unperturbed. The blood pumped out of his heart was mixed with stimulating toxins. She no longer considered the possibility of giving up halfway. Ree slapped the steering wheel heavily and got off the car. He registered with the security personnel in this area and asked for a raincoat that was better than nothing. Then he was about to rush into the curtain of rain. But the security captain called out to him at this time. This experienced B-rank person said very seriously, "Old he, right now Volcano Island has a guest staying for cultivation. Don't misunderstand if you encounter him." Ree did not find it strange that a guest was stationed here. Since the cultivation effects of this small island were extremely good, many ability users were willing to pay a high price to rent the seclusion rooms of the upper echelons of the society to conduct critical cultivation. The society had specially arranged for a few similar areas to be rented out. Not only could they amass wealth, but they could also exchange resources with other people or powers. He went, "Oh." Then he asked in passing, "Which side is it?" "A certain upper echelon of the Order of Justice." "I'm not too sure about the specifics." "The Order of Justice?" Ree was startled. He thought to himself that this was the biggest joke in the world. Who didn't know that the Order of Justice's scales of truth was a first-rate treasure that aided in cultivation? Why would they need to ask the society for help if they had this sort of supreme-grade sacrificial artifact that could suppress the destiny of the Order? Could it be that they were secretly involved in some shady business? Re's mind spun a few times, but he could not figure it out. He just responded, put on the raincoat, and walked outside. He passed by his own flying car and subconsciously glanced inside. He saw the video system that had just been turned off not too long ago. A flash of inspiration suddenly flashed through his mind. At the same time, Luo Nan's excessively young face flashed through his mind. A thought suddenly turned through his mind. Speaking of which, wasn't it because of the order of justice that headquarters became enemies with the Xia City branch and provoked Luo Nan? He had once heard Gong Qi talk about the deeper reason behind this. Wonderful. Re only hesitated beside the car for 2 seconds before she tore off her raincoat and got back into the car. She clenched her teeth and entered the live stream platform again. She then turned on the cooperative live stream mode and bullet comments. Due to his arrival, the live stream inevitably received a huge amount of mockery. Re turned a blind eye to it, or perhaps he had fully absorbed the deep malice and triggered the same emotions in his heart. He faced the 30,000 viewers, twitched his lips, and sneered, "Congratulations to everyone for witnessing a miracle." A 16-year-old kid who entered the inner world for less than 3 months had an extremely exciting and prolonged confrontation with a veteran extraordinary who has been at the peak for 30 years. Before he could finish, the bullet screen in the live streaming channel and the comments on the forum exploded. Oh, I love conspiracy theories. SB, I told you, this is purely a manga setting, okay? Moreover, it's facing the risk of being cut in half at the waist and having a bad ending. Goddess Re, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you please be more suicidal? Tiger touching Re, God, I'm going to eat some broken limbs and minced meat. Could it be that the Emperor's new clothes have been torn? Ghost Eye, what do you think? Luo Nan, He Yuan, what about you guys? There were all sorts of comments. Although their stances were different, the confusion and doubt between the lines couldn't be hidden. Even though there had already been over an hour of foreshadowing and the subversive impact of the cage theory, a few minutes of a newbie and an experienced and powerful extraordinary fighting on equal footing still exceeded the limits of the majority of people's imaginations. The more experienced they were, the more inconceivable they felt. This was the first time Re's words had touched the hearts of the majority of people ever since she became a guest on the live stream. She had touched the extremely sensitive chord in people's hearts. Re paid no attention to the layer upon layer of bullet screens. She just twisted the corner of her lips and continued to sneer, "I'm not doubting Senior Ghost Eye's verification process. No matter how much Senior Ghost Eye doesn't bother with trifles, he still possesses the style that an extraordinary should have. It's impossible for him to put effort into a lie that can be easily seen through. I believe in his professional integrity and his ability to make wise and far-sighted choices." With a plan in mind, Re easily made the majority of the audience dizzy. He looked at the questioning and cursing bullet screens in the projection area and shrugged calmly, "Yes. I believe that there are no problems with the confrontation between Senior Ghost Eye and Luo Nan. I can even say that there are no problems with the strength that Luo Nan himself has displayed. He is worthy of being called the humanoid infrasonic array. He really does stand on a level that we cannot imagine. If I were to participate in this gamble, I would have already lost my pants by now." The surrounding 30,000 viewers online were truly stupefied. Some people even wanted to pull open the projection to see if there was a gun pointed at the back of Re's head. Re could show the back of his head to this group of scum, but he was more than happy to show his clear stance and his undisguised malice. Right now, Luo Nan was still standing on the podium in the circular conference room within the live stream. It was said that he was adjusting the structure of the blood intent ring to wake up those hypnotized idiots one after another. On the other hand, He Yuan's cold and clear gaze pierced through the camera lens. It was biting cold and piercing. Oh, this was the daughter of the He family, one of the most outstanding achievements of the Star Alliance Committee's Team AB. If she was standing in front of him, Re really would have to behave himself. But they were separated by 7,000 kilometers. What was there to be afraid of? Therefore, Yi didn't stumble at all. He spoke eloquently. What I'm most curious about right now is how Luo Nan's strength and potential were accumulated and realized. How was he able to jump to this level in a short period of 70 to 80 days? This doesn't belong to the category of normal. Look, this is an abnormal situation. This is where the problem arises. At this time, it would be perfect if there was someone who could cooperate and act as a supporting character or something. Unfortunately, Yi wanted to continue singing this one-man show. Is Luo Nan a genius? I don't know. But from the information he registered with the headquarters, he wasn't one 2 months ago. He followed his family's so-called formatting theory and painstakingly accumulated for 5 years. He still hasn't touched the ceiling of awakening. He only became a psychic who was better than nothing. He relied on the garrulous psychic diagram and the outbreak of the calamity of the human-faced arachnid to enter the society's line of sight. Is this kind of person a genius? Yi had completely entered the mode of shooting his mouth off. This was his invincible state on the internet in recent years. I've even seen people say that Luo Nan has potential and accumulation. He just hasn't been enlightened yet. He entered the society and received proper cultivation guidance. Then he'll understand everything. I don't know if there's such a situation. I just saw him energetically advocating for formatting theory on the stage. He never mentioned a single word about the guidance of a senior or a friend. Of course, these words were a bit inaccurate. At the very least, Luo Nan had mentioned the guidance of Her Majesty Empress Wu. He had also talked about the condensation ring in class. But right now, what was important was momentum. He didn't care about the details. Yi spread his hands and made a helpless gesture. There's nothing I can do if you guys think so. But if everyone still has a bit of critical spirit and the ability to think independently, then there's no harm in carefully considering this. Luo Nan, this mediocre genius, has miraculously risen for over 2 months. Aside from his dazzling deeds, what else has happened in Xia City? Aside from the calamity of the human-faced arachnid that I've talked about before. Oh, this is Quantum Corporation's fault. But could it be that everyone hasn't heard that this company has gone berserk and conducted experiments in Xia City? They've encircled their territory in order to excavate some hidden treasure in Xia City? Yi laughed very happily in the face of the rapidly boiling atmosphere in the live broadcast room. Also, the conflict between the Order of Justice and the Xia City branch has mustered a large force, and Wang and the majority of the branch have been destroyed. Why? Could it be because of a hedonistic follower? A child? There's no need to hide the conflict between headquarters and the Xia City branch, including the 2000th young miss incident. Why has Luo Nan always become the focus of everyone? Could it be that he's a natural-born troublemaker? After considering all the subjective factors, shouldn't we also consider the more objective facts? When all the problems point towards a single focal point, we don't need to ponder over what he did. Instead, we need to ponder over where he is in reality, what kind of space and resources he occupies. You're perfectly fine blocking the middle of the road. If you don't get hit, who will? Don't you think so? After leaving behind a string of questions, Yi simply cut off the live broadcast signal with a sneer. He opened the door and got out of the car. He no longer cared about the follow-up reactions. He knew that because of his overly straightforward hints, at this moment, at least half of the audience would curse him for having sinister intentions, shameless and despicable intentions. His personal reputation would most likely be ruined, and there might even be some trouble at the headquarters. But so what? After several minutes of confrontation between Luo Nan and Ghost Eye, he had already become a joke. There was nothing to feel distressed about. Plus, if Luo Nan was allowed to develop smoothly, given the conflict between Luo Nan and his teacher, and with himself, there would be conflict sooner or later. And it would certainly be to the point where one side would die. With Luo Nan's terrifying rate of progress, if he didn't take advantage of the opportunity to make a move now, would he wait until Luo Nan calmly amassed his troops and swept his path before regretting it? Truthfully speaking, even Re was a bit convinced by the end of his explanation. It seemed that there really was a high possibility of following this train of thought. It would really be funny if he hit the mark by a fluke. Re picked up the raincoat and put it on. He looked up at the sky. The rainwater poured on his face, bringing with it the cool and fishy smell of the ocean. It seemed to be the smell of Luo Nan's blood. He yelled, "Awesome!" He didn't care about the security captain's hesitant expression as he clenched his teeth and charged into the wind and rain. There was still a straight line of 40 kilometers to the location of Gong Chi's closed-door training. Even though Re was a B-rank power, he would still need to spend 20 minutes on the road in this kind of damned weather. It didn't matter to Re anymore. He faced the wind and rain, swiftly walking through the rugged environment created by the islands, reefs, and the curtain of rain. When he encountered the boundless sea surface where the seawater rose, he used his telekinesis to interfere and solidify it. He treaded on the water and was truly delighted. Before this, he had hoped that the security personnel of these islands and reefs would be strong enough to minimize the effects of tide rush. But right now, he really wished for two blind mutants to jump out and serve as Lord Ho's practice. Unfortunately, the road to Gong Chi's closed-door training was peaceful and quiet. Rumble. Chapter 579. Re was startled and raised his head to take a look. However, there was nothing unusual in the vast water curtain. However, before he could turn his head around, another muffled clap of thunder rang out beside him. There was also turbulent and surging clouds that seemed to have sprayed out from the boundless curtain of rain, bringing along fine ice particles that were like the wind high up in the sky. They hit the back of his neck with a dense chill. Mutant. Re's first reaction was absolutely excellent. Although he was a spiritual type ability user, the psychic shield and confusion barrier he set up instantly formed a circle of hardness and toughness, as well as a shield that had the effect of interfering with bewitchment. The moment the cold air seeped in, his body had already split into 6 illusory shadows, shuttling in all directions. Unless it was a killing move at the level of a transcendent, it would be impossible to finish him off in one hit. However, the problem was that there was nothing else after the cold air, ice particles, and vast clouds. Re had been semi-invisible for almost a minute, and his soul power had been consumed a lot, but he did not find anything else. Around him, clouds and rain intertwined, blocking most of his vision. He could only see waves of turbulent clouds rushing past. Some brushed past him, and some did not feel anything at all. Using his spiritual sense to judge, he was even more confused. He only felt that the inside was illusory, and there was no fixed number. Moreover, through the clouds, the entire space seemed to be suddenly elongated and enlarged, and even shifted to a height of 10,000 meters. There was a blood-red light even further away. What the hell? Re's finger was already pressing the communication and alarm function of the bracelet. Currently, he was under the surveillance of the security team at all times, and he could ask for help at any time if he encountered any danger. As for the so-called practice, how could he take it seriously when he was just imagining things? The security team also responded instantly, and it was the captain of the security team who personally spoke. "Old He, what's the situation?" "The environment here has changed." Re was halfway through his words when a blurry shadow flashed in front of him. He could not see it clearly, but he felt that it was extremely familiar. He subconsciously straightened his body and looked up, and saw the depths of the clouds again, the figure that seemed to be suspended in the air. This time, he could not straighten his tongue. "Old He! Old He!" As the captain of the security team called out, Re muttered, "Teacher." As soon as his voice fell, the shadow over there disappeared in the rolling clouds. "Secretary General Gong has come out of seclusion." The security captain was a little confused, but Re couldn't care less. She leaped up and rushed toward the blurry figure. He ran forward a few steps, but suddenly became alert. This was not Gong Chi's style. Furthermore, this series of cloud images was too different from the natural environment of the island chain. Could it be a mirage? Or was it some kind of malicious illusion? After a moment of hesitation, the surging clouds in the rain suddenly faded away, just like how they came. The strange scene of the sky being distorted and expanded 10,000 meters high also disappeared. Everything returned to normal. At this time, the security chief also sent a message. The surveillance is in place. Your side is fine for now, RE replied in annoyance. What about before? It's harder to get the surveillance equipment on a rainy day. I only saw a wave of fog. It's also shown on the device. Does that mean it's not an illusion? An illusion? The security chief didn't quite understand, but he also had a request for RE. Old he, will be there soon. It's convenient for you now. Help take a look at the situation first. We'll definitely have to write a report later. None of us can escape. RE cursed in her heart and hesitated for a few seconds. She really couldn't stand the security chief's words anymore. Finally, she reluctantly leaned forward and deliberately walked slower. Unfortunately, no matter how slow he walked, it was impossible for him to wait for the security team to arrive. Moreover, in the situation just now, all the sense of distance became very blurry. He walked 7 or 8 steps forward, and suddenly his feet stopped. Re's skin was a little cold and astringent, and her consciousness was a little sluggish. That was the feeling of an illusory and extremely cold psychic power left in the air. That's right, this was indeed Gong Chi's aura. He subconsciously tensed up and called out in a low voice, "Teacher." There was only the sound of the falling rain and the rustling of the volcanic rocks. Other than that, there was nothing else. Re looked around blankly. Reason told him that the scene just now was indeed an illusion. Otherwise, many of the phenomena could not be explained. However, the psychic imprint left in the surroundings was the most conclusive evidence. The conflict between the two sides directly stirred up his brain into paste. While he was still in a daze, he suddenly heard a very low sigh. A new plane. Who was it? Re shuddered violently and almost jumped out of the shield again. However, for some reason, at the same time that the sigh sounded, all the strength in his body silently dissipated. His entire body froze there, and he couldn't even move a toe. At this moment, Re was so scared that he was about to pee. How could he not know that he must have bumped into the hands of some extraordinary? But who was it that could enter such an important place like the headquarters? Re blinked and saw a blurry shadow behind the rain. It was different from the illusion just now. Although he couldn't see the figure's face clearly, he knew that it was a real person. And from the voice, he could hear that it was an adult woman. The person who came had no intention of taking a picture with him. She only whispered there, "This person has a bit of crooked luck." "Are you talking about me?" "Talking to me?" Re wanted to move his mouth, but found that even his ability to speak had been taken away. And the woman said again, "He was just spouting nonsense on the live broadcast, using my church as an example. Now that there are signs here in your headquarters, I wonder how you will stop the mouths of the people in the world." Sure enough. Re's face first flushed red, and then a little green. The person who came was really a high-ranking member of the Order of Justice. This was awkward. However, the woman was obviously not talking to him. There were other people present. Before he could finish his thoughts, the long feminine voice of the headquarters president, Abner, flowed out from the curtain of rain. "The discovery of any plane should be the commonwealth of mankind. This is a good thing worthy of celebration. What is there to block? Since the Lord Officiator happened to be here, we might as well seriously discuss the follow-up confirmation and exploration matters." Abner spoke softly and paid attention to the ups and downs of his syllables, as if he was telling a child a fairy tale. However, Re, who knew his temperament well, subconsciously shuddered. This president was supposed to be in a meeting in Sandalwood City, but it was more likely that his main body was still in Sandalwood City. It was just that his mind wandered over here after receiving the news. Of course, President Abner could come to this small island if he wanted to. This was a matter of course. What really made Re's brain stupefied was the person President Abner had addressed, Officiator. The Order of Justice's officiator. Re froze in the curtain of rain. His entire body was soaked, but he didn't dare to move a muscle. There was a moment when he had the urge to tear off his own death-seeking mouth. Luo Nan, in the circular conference room 7,000 kilometers away, also wanted to tear off his own death-seeking tool. He didn't even have the time to rejoice that he had crossed the crater of abnormal states before he was forced into a corner by the meticulous mental senses of the two apex extraordinaries. Fortunately, the two extraordinaries were courteous to each other. Perhaps they were afraid of each other, so they wouldn't rashly touch each other's cage. Yes, it was more appropriate to use the term domain to describe it. The two's detection senses divided their territories, and they crossed each other. It was hard to avoid some areas where they didn't have a tacit understanding, so they left some gaps. Luo Nan was extremely decisive. He gave up all interference actions in that area in the first instant and entered pure observation mode. His consciousness jumped directly to the polar domain, and he didn't dare to play any more scouting or eavesdropping. He retreated all the way to the Xia City area. After confirming his safety, he couldn't help but laugh involuntarily. He laughed at his death-seeking behavior just now, and he also laughed at the big mistake the two extraordinaries had made. Plane. Was this the name given to the space-time bubble? It was quite magical, but it was completely wrong. Admittedly, the cloud world existed as a plane, but it couldn't be linked to the Sandalwood Island chain. Those abnormalities were nothing more than Luo Nan correcting the precision of his coordinate system and its mode of action. He made a big he made an experiment. Right now, Luo Nan was on the podium, broadcasting live under the gazes of tens of thousands of people. And he used the excuse of adjusting the blood wool bracelet to openly stare blankly. This sudden laugh made many people stupefied. He Yueyin was currently in contact with several higher-ups of the branch due to Re's shameless remarks. They were discussing countermeasures. The contrast was too great when she saw Luo Nan's relaxed appearance. She subconsciously asked, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing. There's a problem with the coordinate system." "Oh." Luo Nan came to his senses. He laughed and didn't speak anymore. But on the plane of his consciousness, there was a point of origin. There were 3 vertical and horizontal lines pointing to various directions and dimensions, delineating the scale of deep space, the Earth, and even the other space-time bubbles. Perhaps this sort of marking was meaningless to an objective world. But to Luo Nan himself, it was a type of high integration. It was similar to the clairvoyance mode of the life sketches from before. This sort of mode filtered and integrated a huge amount of information, forming a corresponding judgment that was only effective to him. Whether it was the large bubble, the small bubble, the large world, or the small cage, they were all similar and equivalent in his thinking mode. He could use the same observation standard to link them all together. Luo Nan was fully deserving of being an expert in doing this sort of thing. This was especially true of the mysterious I symbol and the classical Cartesian coordinate system that was formed from it. It was simply the best framework that was specially created for this purpose. The nearby He Yueyin, the Order of Justice's first ablatum 7,000 kilometers away, and Gong Qi from another plane could all be identified and judged using the same standard. As long as Luo Nan's domain was able to effectively interfere with the area involved, he would be able to map his own rules into that space-time. It was just that this way, when the observation target acted on 2 space-time bubbles at the same time. There was no doubt that this was referring to Gong Qi. He would also stack the contents of the 2 different space-time bubbles together. It was just like Re's hallucination. Luo Nan liked this result very much. And at the same time, he knew that this could become, and he would do his best to make it into, a nightmare for many people. Right now, there was no harm in starting from Chan City. His gaze turned to the live broadcast camera. In that position, Zhang Ji was about to wake up. And Long 7 had already opened his eyes a step earlier than her. His sharp gaze shot over. And it was from Long 7 that the nearly 1,500 participants in the round conference room woke up one after another. Quite a few of them felt as if they had just experienced an unrealistic dream. But at the same time, there were quite a few people who absorbed nourishment from this unrealistic dream. They reorganized the operation of their own abilities. As more and more people woke up, the conference room gradually became chaotic. Luo Nan was certain that he wouldn't let the class continue. He took advantage of the fact that most people still hadn't completely regained their senses to declare. Chapter 580. Congratulations, King of Luck, Mr. 1 in 1,000. Don't joke about this. It's not that rare anymore, okay? It can't be helped. As long as we meet in Xia City, we're doomed to not be able to escape. So what if it's always luck? Ah, this is crazy. Don't they think that just because I'm in Xia City, I'm definitely a member of the Xia City branch? It's probably because you look like a bro, Bamboo Pole laughed out loud. His reaction was a bit conspicuous in this high-class restaurant, but he didn't care about the gazes cast at him. He just raised his glass to the middle-aged, slightly plump, yet still handsome, short-haired woman across from him. The latter also raised her glass and clinked it with bamboo poles. She sighed once more, what an enviable luck. Especially when it's destined to fall on your head. Bamboo Pole raised his eyebrows. What do you mean? Isn't your relationship with that person destined to be the first to enjoy the moonlight? That's true, but can you please sit up straight first? Sun Jiai didn't just say that before. She also used body language to express it. She smiled as she straightened her body. Under the light, the soul-stirring lines of her cleavage finally became a bit more normal. But she also mercilessly ridiculed her old friend, B rank is for showing off, not for acting. I'm not acting. It's just that the older I get, the pickier I get. Sun Jiai raised her glass again before it even touched the ground. She wanted to pour it on Bamboo Pole's face, but Bamboo Pole immediately begged for mercy. The two had been friends for several decades. They were infinitely close to being friends with benefits, but they were far more than friends with benefits. Their feelings were subtle and smooth. They didn't treat each other as outsiders when they spoke. Sun Jiai didn't hide her goal at all at this time. She took the initiative to clinch her glass with bamboo poles and said, now is the time for you to play your role. My role? Intelligence? Your value lies in your relationship with Teacher Luo. Hey! This isn't slander. This is the truth. You are the first patient out of the 1447 people in the meeting to jump from C rank to B rank by some dog's hit luck. Why is it you and not someone else? Do you dare to deny that this has nothing to do with your friendship with that Teacher Luo? And then? Of course it's because of the Ring of Blood Will. There's nothing wrong with the Blood Will hoop, but it requires a number of people, a circle, and experience. Adding all of these factors together, only Mr. Luo can satisfy them. That's true. Bamboo Pole had more or less understood, but Sun Jiai still wanted to make things clear. So I hope. Oh, to be more precise, Starry Sky Society hopes that Mr. Luo can come to our society and give another public lecture. The content can be the same as the one on the night of the 14th, Mr. Luo can do whatever he wants. All the preparations and expenses, including remuneration, we will definitely satisfy Mr. Luo. Of course, that includes you as a middleman. Bamboo Pole raised his eyebrows and laughed. Starry Sky Club? Bro, what are you doing? Sun Jiai shrugged. An academic conference and a business cooperation. The LCRF is cooperating with the branch? LCRF has never been the only shareholder of the Starry Sky Club. We just provide a place for everyone to communicate and occasionally do the most meaningful theme. Mr. Luo's Ring of Blood will possesses such value. Bamboo Pole smiled, but did not immediately respond. Sun Jiai saw Bamboo Pole's reaction and knew that it would be difficult to persuade him this time. She also knew that although Bamboo Pole seemed to be joking, he was actually very determined. It would be very difficult to open an opening for him, so she settled for the next best thing. How about being a messenger? I'll pay you according to the middleman's price. After all, you still don't know Mr. Luo's own intentions. You have to say that to Secretary He. Besides, with your ability, are you afraid that you can't find a messenger? That's why I came to you. That's not because of your ability. Before he finished speaking, Bamboo Pole's increasingly sensitive senses noticed that a few tables away, a person was cautiously approaching and even making eye contact with Sun Jiai. Sun Jiai's genial expression probably made the person misunderstand something. The person straightened his clothes and hurried over. His heart was beating fast and he was a little nervous. However, his voice was still very clear and pleasant. Sister Jiai, what a coincidence. Sun Jiai raised her eyelids and her smile faded a little. This is my territory. Are you surprised to see me? I'm the one who can't wait for more coincidences like this. Didn't I come here immediately? The person who came was a young man with handsome features. He was dressed in a decent casual suit, and the way he dressed his hands and feet were quite tasteful. What was more rare was that he knew how to speak. He held a bottle of expensive red wine in both hands and stood there in a very stylish manner. He was a celebrity that left a deep impression on people. In fact, he was indeed a celebrity. Bamboo Pole, who usually paid attention to beautiful celebrities and entertainment gossip, quickly recognized that this person was called Lan Lin. He was a popular idol in the past 2 years, and he seemed to have a good image. Lan Lin smiled and took 2 more steps forward. She nodded politely at Bamboo Pole, and then her eyes flew to Sun Jiai's face. She bent down and moved her face closer to Sun Jiai. She lowered her voice and said, Sister Jiai, are you free tonight? Without waiting for him to finish, Sun Jiai's faded smile bloomed again. The next moment, she reached out and pinched Lan Lin's chin. After all, they were in front of people. Lan Lin's expression slightly stiffened. He instinctively wanted to turn his head. He wanted to avoid it, but he also wanted to see what his target was. He quickly suppressed his impulse and let Sun Jiai do it. Sun Jiai's grip wasn't too strong, but it wasn't too weak either. She pulled off half an inch from Lan Lin's neck, as if she were treating an Alaskan Malamute. Lan Lin even narrowed his eyes and snorted. Sister Jiai, it was an amazing reaction, so Sun Jiai smiled quite happily. Unfortunately, in front of an ability user, the conflict in this reaction could not be hidden at all. Bamboo Pole didn't even blink. He didn't think it was strange. He already knew that this friend of his was a lustful person who liked to seek all kinds of stimulation. As a senior manager of the Starry Sky Club in Xia City, he was fully deserving of his position of power in Xia City. Finding a few celebrity dogs to have fun with was nothing. Of course, understanding was one thing, and approval was another. In the past, because of her temperament and beauty, Bamboo Pole had wanted to pursue her. Later, after seeing her true colors, he could only be friends. Sun Jiai openly flirted with her dog. Bamboo Pole minded his own business and tasted his wine. But at this time, he noticed that a gaze was cast over from where Lan Lin had come from. The gaze was filled with surprise and anger. Bamboo Pole could sense it. Sun Jiai was no exception. But she didn't care about that side. After testing the feel of his chin, she patted Lan Lin's left cheek. She used quite a bit of strength. Pia. The left side of Lan Lin's face turned red. Sun Jiai's tone was quite intimate. Unaccountably solicitous. It's for that event, right? Lan Lin's smile became even more brilliant. He focused his gaze on Sun Jiai, trying to show the moist and adorable feeling of a dog's eyes. If it were any other time, perhaps Sun Jiai would chat a bit more with him. But right now, there were more important things to do. She didn't want to waste time. You can't even complete the most basic task. Don't even think about being a guest. Just do your best service. Go. Don't let your imagination run wild. Lan Lin was a little anxious. But then he saw Sun Jiai's sharp and cold eyes. He subconsciously shivered. He didn't dare to say a word. He bowed and retreated. And now, Bamboo Pole was in a watching mode. He watched Lan Lin leave in a daze. Soon, he got into a quarrel with a beautiful girl who came with him. That beautiful girl was probably broken by Lan Lin's dog mode. She was so angry that she cried and left the table. Oh, that beautiful girl seemed to be an artist too. What was her name again? Is it interesting? Sun Jiayi raised her glass. She was about to get down to business with Bamboo Pole. But seeing Bamboo Pole's interested look, she smiled and snapped her fingers at Lan Lin, who was wearing sunglasses and a mask to avoid the strange gazes of other people in the restaurant. Lan Lin didn't care about anything else. He quickly walked over. Sister Jiayi. Sun Jiayi smiled at him. What's your girlfriend's name? She's not. Lan Lin wanted to deny it. But when he met Sun Jiayi's eyes, he could only answer honestly. She's Clara. She's a member of BHD. We're in the same company. She's a good girl. I feel sorry for her. Chase her down and have a drink together. Don't make it too ugly. Lan Lin was a little confused. He couldn't guess what Sun Jiayi was thinking. But suddenly, there was a turning point. No matter what, he had to seize it. He immediately responded and rushed over. Bamboo Pole curled his lips. You think you're an omnivore? Don't be ungrateful. I prepared it for you. Don't. I don't play this game. You think it's too light? We can go together. Get lost. Now Bamboo Pole wanted to pour wine in Sun Jiayi's face. Sun Jiayi didn't think much of it. She held the cup and lightly touched her chin. She smiled at him and said, You've reached a certain level of acting now. But since we're friends, can you tell me what kind of person Mr. Luo is? What do you want? We're in the service industry. We need to do some research. Get lost. Bamboo Pole made his attitude firm again. He didn't want to talk about this topic anymore. He turned his head to watch the real-life idol drama. At this time, Lan Lin had already caught up with Clara when she rushed out of the restaurant. He reached out to grab her arm. But in the next second, Clara, whose face had turned pale, was protected in someone's arms. Lan Lin, on the other hand, was kicked into the restaurant's glass door. Bamboo Pole saw who it was. Ouch! He looked at Sun Jiayi. Chapter 581. Luo Nan, who was outside the restaurant, was a bit baffled. Out of the blue, a beautiful girl with a pale face bumped into his embrace. Then a fully armed fellow with sunglasses and a mask caught up from behind. He didn't care about the group of people and extended his hand to pull. Then the hedonistic young master He Donglu, who was treating tonight, sent a flying kick. He sent the sunglasses masked man flying into the glass door. The sunglasses were slanted, revealing a large portion of his handsome and twisted face. He had a bit of an impression. With great difficulty, Luo Nan was able to match the handsome faces and identities of the man and woman. Huh, Clara. They were all from the same company as his sister. Clara in his embrace was a member of the BHD group. Though it was an 18th tier group, she was extremely good-looking. Another member of the group, Bai, had contacted him twice recently. They had arranged to have a meal together. Their relationship could be considered decent from Luo Nan's perspective. As for the sunglasses masked man, he had an impression of him, Lan Lin, the so-called high-quality idol. But he still hadn't been captured. He was one of the female celebrity Ji Qiong's friends with benefits. It was reasonable to say that he was a high-risk person for the mutant infection. What the hell was the branch doing? Oh my! We're kindred spirits. Perhaps it was Luo Nan's misperception, but He Donglu's tone was a bit odd. However, this also proved that He Donglu finally recognized who this person was. The smile on his face changed a bit. He walked over with his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't wait for Lan Lin to crawl up and stomped him to the ground. I never thought that you would have a bit of dog's hit luck, kid. He Donglu had stomped Lan Lin in order to express his attitude in front of Luo Nan. But now it was inevitably mixed with personal resentment. He twisted his neck, feeling unwell from head to toe. He originally wanted to have a one-night stand with that female artist called Ji Cheong, but he never thought that she was actually a carrier of the mutant infection virus. He was tossed and turned by the military medical organization several times in the following week. It was with great difficulty that he was able to pass the test. Now it seemed that the kid, Lan Lin, had escaped a calamity. This made him feel quite unhappy. He Donglu felt that it was natural for his family to stomp on others, but he was a bit too arrogant. Lan Lin was an idol that millions and millions of boys and girls chased after him. How could he endure such extraordinary humiliation? As an idol, Lan Lin's physical qualities were decent. He immediately arched his back and straightened his body, causing He Donglu to stagger. Then he held the glass door and struggled to get up, shouting, "Security, security." Lan Lin's personal assistant, follower, and bodyguard discovered the problem at this time. They made a big fuss as they rushed over. Luo Nan and He Donglu had no lack of bodyguards by their side. As for the restaurant's security guards, it was impossible for them to ignore this situation. They immediately sent more people to control the situation. A group of people crowded the entrance of the restaurant. Luo Nan was very vexed by this sort of scene. If tonight's banquet didn't involve an important matter, he simply wanted to turn around and leave. Luo Nan let out another sigh. He lowered his head to look at the beautiful girl in his embrace, who was in a dazed state. "Hey, Clara. Are you all right?" The second greeting finally brought Clara back to her senses from her absent-minded state. She quickly recognized Luo Nan. She also roughly recognized the current situation. She subconsciously struggled for a bit and came out from Luo Nan's embrace. "Thank you, Mr. Luo." The way Clara addressed him was far more distant than on the day they first met. She wasn't in a good state of mind, but she also had the modesty of a woman. She also wanted to save face. The more it was like this, the harder it was to say some words. She was even more unwilling to stay here for too long. She didn't turn around to look at Lan Lin's condition. She bowed once more towards Luo Nan. "I'm sorry for disturbing you. I'll apologize to you later." Clara didn't even raise her head after speaking. She wanted to leave with quick steps. Just as she passed by Luo Nan grabbed her by the arm and pulled her to a stop. "Wait a moment. Don't go yet." This action was more or less the same as Lan Lin's. Clara's heart tightened, and she looked back in shock. The entrance to the restaurant was crowded with people. Naturally, He Donglu wouldn't put himself in danger. He had long since retreated back. He was originally mulling over how to deal with that pretty boy Lan Lin, but when he saw Luo Nan's actions, he couldn't help but join in the fun. He immediately laughed. "Look at the trouble in front of you. You want to leave with just a word of thanks. How could it be that easy? This fellow wouldn't be able to sleep if he didn't take liberties with the beautiful girl." It wasn't even a matter of taking liberties. At least Luo Nan remembered that He Donglu was quite interested in Clara during the last rehearsal. So Luo Nan gave him a cold glance. He Donglu immediately responded with a smiling face, appearing to be quite good-tempered. But at this time, whether it was Clara, who was close by, or Lan Lin, who was separated by the crowd, they both recognized this extremely famous crown prince bro in their circle. With Luo Nan's keen senses, he was already aware of Clara's instantly stiffening body and her highly taut mental state. This made her even more terrified and flustered than when Lan Lin had caught up. It was very clear that the young girl's thoughts were crooked. As for Lan Lin, when he saw He Donglu's face clearly, his chest, which was about to explode from being squeezed by a ruthless aura, was like a punctured balloon. In a short amount of time, he became a piece of soft skin. The ground beneath his feet became even softer. He shrunk down the moment he touched the glass door. In his mind, he just wanted to be a dog. He borrowed the crowd of people in front of him to tuck his tail between his legs and hide in a crack in the ground. Oh, Lan Lin subconsciously shot a glance at the restaurant when he thought of a dog, but he didn't see the woman who had driven him here. This sucked away the last bit of strength he had. It was as if his brain had been scrubbed clean. Large expanses of blankness. Oh my. Did I say something wrong? He Donglu really liked this sort of boss, who became the focus and source of everyone's fear. No, he didn't need to act. If he didn't rein in the rope, then this bro would be a devil incarnate. It wouldn't be a pity if he was stabbed to death by a hero. Luo Nan didn't want to stab him to death for now, but he really wanted to give him a kick. This was clearly a very serious matter, yet this silk pants had bumped into a fork in the road. Actually, Luo Nan's thoughts were very simple. He had seriously sized up Lan Lin before, confirming that this person hadn't been infected by the mutant virus. But the homework he had done some time ago showed that there was a difference between an infected person and a carrier. Lan Lin, who was a public figure, was a natural spreader who couldn't control his pants. He was truly a very troublesome source of danger. Though Luo Nan didn't care about the mutant virus infection anymore, Clara was still a friend he had interacted with before. Expanding layer by layer, there was also the BHD group, Hai Jing, and even the circle of relatives and friends like Imoya. Looking at the relationship between Clara and Lan Lin, they should be quite close. If by any chance she was infected, then the problem would be very serious. For the sake of caution, Luo Nan had to do an examination. He couldn't let her leave no matter what. Right when he was having a headache about how to convince the fearful Clara to accept the examination, someone walked over with a smile. She held Clara's other arm. Barbie, don't listen to their inappropriate words. Clara, who was in a state of panic, turned her head when she heard someone call her by her nickname. She saw a woman wearing sunglasses, dressed in a low-key and elegant manner. This face was even more familiar, even though it lacked the powerful aura that she usually had. Sister Wei Wei. The person who had come was actually the first-rate female artist of the company. She was a strong competitor for the future #1 sister, Shi Wei. Only now did Clara recall that Shi Wei was He Dongluo's lover. It wasn't unexpected for them to appear here together. Clara looked at the beautiful and familiar face before her eyes. Even though they weren't normally close, Clara still felt a bit emotional. The rims of her eyes immediately turned red. The current Shi Wei wasn't as aloof and cold as she normally was. Instead, she displayed the bearing of the #1 sister of the company. Barbie, you should be happy that you kicked a trash man ahead of time. Okay, if you keep shedding tears, I can't help but question your level of image management. I'm sorry. The stricter seniority relationships in the company as well as the clearer hierarchy made Clara's heartstrings subconsciously taut. Actually, her heart was still filled with bewilderment and fear right now. Shi Wei's appearance didn't lower the intensity of her fear. Instead, it increased it. After all, this wasn't a group occasion in the company. She even hid it from her manager, Hai Jing, in order to go on a date with Lan Lin. It would be great if things really developed like a romantic story. But she was truly alone and helpless in this current situation. It was also at this time that all sorts of facts and rumors within the industry were like demonic winds blowing from all sides. They seeped into every gap in her thoughts. At this very moment, let alone Shi Wei, even if the company's supervisors and directors were here, it would be hard for Clara to think in an optimistic direction. Shi Wei's unprecedentedly gentle tone still lingered by her ears, but it seeped into the bottom of her heart with a dense chill. This is the suburbs. You're in a daze right now. No one will feel at ease if you go home by yourself. How about? Shi Wei originally wanted to drag Clara along to the banquet. Seeing Luo Nan's reaction, Shi Wei had a good impression of this little girl. But when she spoke to this point, she felt that she couldn't overstep her boundaries. She couldn't help but be stuck for a moment. Then someone followed up her words, how about we first get a room to rest for a bit and tidy things up? We can wait for Mr. Luo to finish his discussion and come out. Then we can go back together. Someone pushed open the restaurant's outer door as they spoke. Warm steam came out along with a fragrant wind, blowing away the crowd of people outside. Luo Nan saw that the speaker was a middle-aged woman with a unique temperament. She had short hair similar to a boy's, and she wore a low-cut suit geared towards women. She was a bit unfamiliar. But the person walking shoulder to shoulder with her couldn't be any more familiar. Brother Bamboo Pole. Bamboo Pole beamed as he waved his hand in greeting. You're free today. Come eat a feast. Young master, he is treating. Brother, I'm also here to see a friend. Bamboo Pole didn't chat with him in depth. He nodded and gave the initiative of the conversation back to Sun Jiai. Sun Jiai didn't pay attention to the other people present. She walked straight to Luo Nan, bowed slightly, and offered her name card with both hands. Sun Jiai, one of the local supervisors. I failed to control the situation just now and disturbed Teacher Luo. I ask for your forgiveness. Since she called him Teacher Luo, then she was certainly from the inner world. She was also Bamboo Pole's friend. Luo Nan wouldn't treat her badly. He accepted the name card with both hands. He felt that Sun Jiai's suggestion had touched the bottom of his heart. He took advantage of the situation and said, Sister Sun's suggestion is the best. Clara, why don't you rest here for a bit? We can go together later. Luo Nan needed to give Clara a checkup. He also needed to contact He Yueyin or Her Majesty Empress Wu to clearly ask about the follow-up handling of the mutant invasion. He had already instructed Qin Kuan, who followed by his side, to make arrangements through the Hexayear. However, he was a bit regretful at this time. He didn't bring Cat Eyes along. Otherwise, he would have saved quite a bit of time and effort. Realistically speaking, Clara's will didn't carry much weight now that Luo Nan had made the decision. Luo Nan was worried that she was overthinking things. He simply flipped through his communications book. How about I get someone to come over and accompany you? Bai Yu and the others are nearby. Cat Eyes. No need. I'm fine by myself. Clara's voice was a bit hurried, reflecting an intense feeling of rejection. But soon she pursed her lips and lowered her eyelids. Her slightly curled hair hung down from her forehead. She really was like an exquisite Barbie doll, allowing herself to be manipulated by others. It seemed that there really was a bit of a misunderstanding. Luo Nan was able to feel that Clara's mental cage was withering and warping. There was still a bit of space that was unwavering. This kind of willpower had already exceeded the norm. Shi Wei continued to display the demeanor of a big sister. She stuck closer to Clara's body and laughed lightly. I can accompany Barbie for a chat. I'm not joking. I've always felt that this is a good thing. Clara didn't open her mouth, so she didn't have any objections. Luo Nan grunted, and He Donglu didn't refuse. He just said, You're done settling things. Hurry up and come over. And so, the matter on this side was settled. He Donglu and Luo Nan walked inside, and the crowd of people in front of the restaurant naturally dispersed. As for a certain person who was curled up into a ball by the glass door. Who cared? Luo Nan turned his head back. His target was Bamboo Pole. Bro, do you want to come together? No need. Let's not disturb each other. Bamboo Pole giggled and waved his hand. Sun Jiai shot him a covert glare, but Bamboo Pole didn't pay any attention to her. Luo Nan saw all of these small details and chuckled twice. He felt that this was a bit interesting. He really envied Bamboo Pole's carefree and easygoing attitude. Not to mention that Bamboo Pole also hid extraordinary wisdom within. Whether it was the depth and breadth of knowledge when Bamboo Pole taught him, or the penetrating and incisive theses of the order, or the fact that Bamboo Pole was the first to break through the barrier of nearly 1,500 participants and enter B rank. All of this proved that Bamboo Pole was extraordinary. The group of people continued to walk inside. He Donglu was a young master who loved to step on salted fish the most. He felt refreshed and his mind was lively, so he came over and said, Since we're friends, let's drink a few cups together. Actually, it's good to have Clara accompany you. We brothers drink for the sake of being relaxed and at ease. Luo Nan cast a sidelong glance at him. He never felt that he had any sort of brotherly friendship with this fellow. They walked a few more steps as they spoke, and 4 diners suddenly stood up at a table at the edge of the aisle. They greeted from afar, Teacher Luo. He Donglo's words were interrupted. He was stupefied for a moment. Luo Nan blinked his eyes and responded, hello. Luo Nan thought that perhaps they were people who had participated in the training course on the 14th. As for the specifics, how could he remember so many people when there were 1,500 of them? Luo Nan didn't pay attention to this sort of thing. He passed by the table of people. But a mere half a second later, a figure stood up diagonally in front of him. It was originally a single person, but the momentum caused the people at the table to be unable to resist. They subconsciously stood up as well. Teacher Luo. It was still an unfamiliar face. He was 40 or 50 years old, but he was the same as the people at the table in front of him. All of them had respectful expressions on their faces. The confused expressions of the other people at the table were all the more distinct. Luo Nan could only respond, no need to be polite. You guys eat. Chapter 582. This was a high-class restaurant located on the outskirts of Xia City. It was located in a holiday villa under the banner of the Starry Sky Club. The daily flow of people wasn't large, but it was an important place for the ability users of the inner world and the resource users of the secular society to interact with each other. As time went by, it became one of the high-class circles of Xia City. It must be said that this was a relatively specialized place. However, once the pretentiousness was established, some idiots who didn't understand anything flocked to this place like a flock of ducks. They sharpened their brains to get in. Under the tacit approval of the club's organizers, a considerable number of so-called outsiders came here to spend their money. This could more or less be considered a kind of cover. But at this time, when a quarter of the people in the restaurant stood up and addressed him as Teacher Luo to express their attitude, any cover would be useless. There were over 100 faces in the restaurant. At least for the first few seconds, most of them were perplexed and curious. But as the 20 or so ability users addressed him in the same manner, these self-righteous but ignorant fellows quickly became homogeneous. They even displayed a more sincere and respectful attitude than those in the know. It could be imagined that in the future, the address of Teacher Luo would become a legendary topic of conversation in the so-called circle along with his extraordinarily tender face. All those in the know and those who didn't know would take delight in talking about it. Such a change made Sun Jiai, who had been observing from the entrance of the restaurant all along, subconsciously sigh. The less than 2 hours of teaching on the night of the 14th had introduced an extraordinary character to the world. Sun Jiai really wanted to immediately hook up with Luo Nan, but she had to deal with the rotten tail pulled out by that dead dog, Lan Lin. She could only watch as Luo Nan and his party climbed up to the 2nd floor of the restaurant and entered the private room area. She used the fastest speed to finish dealing with the chores. There were no other irrelevant people in the surroundings. Sun Jiai finally had the leisure to give Bamboo Pole a sneer, "You really aren't going to help me at all. But I didn't tear down your stage. Don't tell me you want me to explain everything from start to finish." Sun Jiai really wanted to stomp her 10 centimeters into Bamboo Pole's thick skin. But when she thought about how this fellow still had value, all she could do was roll her eyes. Bamboo Pole smiled and said, "Your dog won't be of much use tonight. Don't tell me you still have feelings for me. Let's be decent to the end. We'll finish the rest of the bottle and go home." Sun Jiai continued to sneer, "You don't have to blindly think for me. A living dog has its advantages, and a dead dog has its uses." Bamboo Pole observed a moment of silence for Lan Lin. Then, like a gentleman, he opened the door for Sun Jiai and the two returned to their seats. Before he could settle down, there was a sudden commotion on the 2nd floor, and it was quite loud. At first there was the loud sound of a door being slammed, followed by a shrill voice shouting, "One last thing for him, it's better to leave as a martialist than to die at home as a sickly rich man." 5 seconds later, a tall and lean man with a cold expression appeared at the top of the stairs. At this moment, over 100 gazes from the restaurant downstairs were focused on him. This person could be considered a capable person. Even in such a state, he could still stride forward without looking sideways. Soon, he was out of the restaurant and disappeared into the night. There were over 100 people on the first floor. Some recognized this person, and some didn't. Bamboo Pole and Sun Jiai belonged to the former category, Duan Hong, the head of the Thunder Falcon Dojo. He was one of the most famous people in Xia City in recent days. Today is the 19th, right? There are only 3 days left until the winter solstice. Sun Jiai raised her wine glass. Half of her face was covered by the luster of the blood-red liquid. Only the corner of her lips curled up slightly. It's quite hard to hold that face in. I can hear the sound of his heart venting even from here. It's as if a burden has been lifted from his shoulders. Bamboo Pole used an idiom to accurately describe the situation. A week ago, not many people paid attention to the grudge between the Thunder Falcon Dojo and the Divine Yu Dojo. But a few short days later, the winter solstice duel between the two dojo masters had become a hot topic in the circle of ability users in Xia City. Especially after that class on the night of the 14th, Teacher Luo had become the absolute focus of attention. Every word he uttered was broken down and analyzed. This included some gossip that had nothing to do with the main topic of the class. Back then, Luo Nan had mentioned the words Gym Master Xiao who taught me body techniques. He had also mentioned the Tinder as well as the classification of the basic unit, the central unit, and the expansion unit. These were relatively core concepts of the system. It was also from that night onwards that the name, Xiao Xinyu, rose quite a bit in the eyes of many people. Correspondingly, the Thunder Falcon Dojo, which had a direct conflict with Xiao Xinyu, became the focus of many people. Fine, they were actually the target of ridicule. As long as Duan Hong wasn't an idiot, he would certainly feel the pressure. As for what he would do next, it could be seen now. At this time, a young man chased down from the second floor. He hurried past. Though he was dressed in casual clothes, the two recognized him. He was Zhu Ling, a lieutenant colonel of the Coastal Defense Army. He was Blood Prison Tian Bang's adjutant. He was the standard rising star of the military. It's better to find someone from the military to solve the problem. Bamboo Pole took a sip of wine. He knew that Duan Hong had a military background, but Duan Hong was quite thoughtful to be able to find He Dong Lu after so many twists and turns. Though Bamboo Pole didn't see the scene, he could guess it. He Dong Lu mediated in the middle, and Duan Hong got off the slope like a donkey. Duan Hong could give up a favor along the way. Luo Nan would certainly fall for this. After all, Xiao Xinyu really couldn't afford to be tossed around. As for what Duan Hong's final style was, his persona, and what other tricks he would use in the future, it no longer mattered to the overall situation. He Dong Lu is treating us to a meal. First, he's giving us a favor. He should have some ulterior motive. Sun Jiai pondered over the knots within and naturally came to a preliminary conclusion. Does the He family want to take a step further with Mr. Luo? There's no need for He Dong Lu. Secretary he is enough. Sun Jiai's eyes squinted in laughter. That's not necessarily true. Oh, there's an inside story. An exchange? As long as you're willing to help. Go ball. Bamboo Pole didn't say anything. He recognized Sun Jiai as a friend, but he never forgot the difference in positions between the two. The Starry Sky Society invited Luo Nan to open a class. It was fine if they just wanted to ride on the limelight. At most, it would be a matter of who earned more and who earned less. Presumably, Luo Nan wouldn't care. But the problem was it really good to have Luo Nan too involved with the Starry Sky Society? For ability users, not accepting missions from the Starry Sky Society was certainly the performance of a rookie. But at the same time, lingering in the society's circle without going was undoubtedly the starting point of depravity. The Starry Sky Society was a circle of the inner world's periphery created by the cooperation of headquarters and several capital powers. The purpose of its establishment was to realize the effective exchange of the value of ability users with the capital of secular society. Since the issue of exchange of interests was involved, it was obviously a super fat piece of meat. Everyone wanted to take a bite out of it. As a result, within this society and its attached organization, there were all kinds of entanglements of interests and dark sides that people couldn't bear to look straight at. And the corresponding hundreds of stimulating temptations were the culmination of human society. Bamboo Pole believed himself to be a layman. He was far from being a moral gentleman, but he was an adult with many years of experience. He had his own sense of judgment. But what about Luo Nan? His terrifying worldview was basically set in stone. His outlook on life and values were still in the developing stage. Even if jade was not cut and polished, it would be useless. That was only true for a rock. If there was a giant fusion reactor in front of him, it would be better not to take the risk. Bamboo Pole swirled his wine glass. He looked relaxed, but he had erected a high defensive line in his heart. Sun Jiayi was also swirling her wine glass. Her eyebrows and eyes, beneath her exquisite makeup, seemed to cast shadows on Bamboo Pole's face through the swirling wine. It also seemed to drift to a place that was hard to reach. It couldn't be said that the two didn't have any appetite for the rest of the time, but most of their minds weren't on chatting. Another 10 minutes or so passed. Shi Wei, who had gone to help Clara settle down earlier, walked into the restaurant and headed to the second floor. Sun Jiayi looked at her watch. She used Shi Wei's ascension to the second floor as the starting point. She brought out the last of her patients and waited for another 7 or 8 minutes. Finally, she stood up. I'm going to say hello to Mr. Luo and the others. Do you want to come with me? We agreed not to disturb each other. Sun Jiayi's exquisitely sculpted eyebrows rose. They were like sharp blades that could chop down at any time. Bamboo Pole shrugged his shoulders, and the words that followed were cut short. Sun Jiayi ascended to the private room area of the restaurant's second floor 90 seconds later. She had an extremely precise grasp of time. The hot appetizers were just served when she arrived at the entrance of the private room. She entered with the food server. There were very few people in the room. Aside from Duan Hong and Zhu Ling, who had just left, there were only Luo Nan, He Donglu, and Shi Wei. However, no matter how much Sun Jiayi thought about it, she still didn't expect to see such a scene when she pushed the door open and entered. Shi Wei was at the center of the scene in the private room. This beauty had already unbuttoned the cuffs of her shirt. She folded the sleeves up, revealing her white lotus-like arm. As a superstar, Shi Wei's body was first-rate in terms of talent and maintenance. Under the soft lighting, her arm was like a divine item carved out of white jade. Even though Sun Jiayi was also a woman, her heart still rippled when she saw it. All right, Sun Jiayi was a famous omnivore in the circle. Her gender was not restricted. Her heart was simply moved when she saw this scene. She even thought that she might add one more person to her prey list later. As for the hedonistic son of rich parents like He Donglu, she really didn't put him in her eyes. The problem was, the position of Shi Wei's white jade arm. Wasn't it a bit inappropriate? That white jade arm was stretched out on the table. It was crooked yet not crooked. It was straight yet not straight. It was natural and alluring. The problem was that most of her wrist was grasped in the palm of Luo Nan's right hand. Luo Nan's other hand was like a ruler. He measured from wrist to elbow, and then to upper arm. Please, you're not a fashion designer. What's the point of poking and prodding with your finger? Sun Jiayi's eyes were extremely sharp. She could see from the degree of creases on Shi Wei's clothes that this female star had already pulled out the hem of her shirt. If she were to straighten up right now, she might even be able to see a chunk of her belly. Describing such a scene as disheveled was not a problem at all. It didn't matter if this scene was seen by the food server, but it really wasn't appropriate for a famous supervisor to get involved. Chapter 583. He was really rash. This was the first thought that came to Sun Jiayi's mind. If it were someone else, she wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake. With the standard of her spiritual senses, even if she didn't enter the room, she could still roughly grasp the situation in the room. But the problem was that the person she was facing now was an extraordinary genius who had just come up with the cage theory and guided 1,500 ability users and extraordinaries to battle for 300 rounds in the Abyss region. It was this genius who stated that the majority of mental senses were a conflict between violating and being violated. The winner would take it all, and the loser would die. No matter how much self-confidence Sun Jia had, she could only be a violated character in a wrestling match on the mental plane. That was if Luo Nan was interested in her. Sun Jia had never thought of investigating the situation inside the private room. Otherwise, she would only be asking to be humiliated. But Luo Nan, who always had a good reputation, actually did this sort of action. It was really unexpected. Fortunately, Sun Jia had been on the battlefield for a long time and had the ability to deal with it. Her expression didn't change at all. It was as if she was watching a very normal scene. She continued to speak according to the predetermined sentence. Mr. Luo, young master He, are the dishes today to your liking? He Donglu more or less knew a bit about Sun Jia's background. He chuckled and said, not bad, not bad. Especially the appetizer at the front. It's quite creative. Sun Jia's spiritual senses were useless, but the method of observing people that she had trained for many years was still effective. She could roughly judge the current mental state of the three people in the private room. The one who didn't care the most was He Donglu. The one who didn't need to pay attention to the most was Shi Wei. As for the most important one, well, he felt that it was a bit more complicated. Awkwardness was not awkwardness, and calmness was not calmness either. It was more obvious that he was at a loss, as if he did not know how to face it. In the end, he returned to a kind of almost wooden indifference. Such a strange reaction made Sun Jia mark it in her heart. She wanted to test it again, but the conditions didn't allow it. Luo Nan wasn't someone who was good at conversing. Communicating with He Donglu was meaningless. Sun Jia could only exchange a few more polite words before withdrawing. From start to finish, she was gone for around a minute. When he returned to Bamboo Pole's side, Bamboo Pole asked with interest, how's the progress? Sun Jia replied casually, take your time. Bamboo Pole laughed. Fine. You've entered the door. Go ahead and have your wicked thoughts. I won't accompany you anymore. I'll go back and work hard. Sun Jia responded, but when Bamboo Pole got up, she suddenly asked, does this Mr. Luo of yours have any special preferences? Do you think I'll tell you? Sun Jia pursed her lips and thought for a moment. She nodded but soon shook her head. You're not telling me. Is it to keep it a secret, or is it a secret to begin with? Bamboo Pole was slightly startled, but then he smiled and pointed at her. You're smart, but don't overdo it. This is advice from a friend. Sun Jia bowed slightly in her chair. Thank you, goodbye. Bamboo Pole glanced at her again. His finger slid across his brows, and he performed a nondescript salute before leaving with a smile. As she watched her old friend disappear into the darkness outside the restaurant, Sun Jia lowered her head and thought seriously for a few minutes. Then, in her personal storage space, she opened the information that she had already collected and organized. This included all the information regarding Luo Nan that could be gathered from various channels. It was voluminous and hard to count. It was impossible to comb through all this information in a short amount of time, but Sun Jia already had a clear goal. She used her AI to filter and extract all the information she could find on Luo Nan's social interactions in various situations. This included images and written records. She created a new folder, thought for a moment, and named it Persona. Then, she connected to a secret channel through the internet. Maybe we need to increase the input of the psychological analysis team. Yes, we need it now. Luo Nan wasn't too affected by Sun Jia's entrance in the private room on the second floor, but he never planned on spending too much time on Shi Wei. Not long after Sun Jiayi left the room, he stopped measuring with his fingers and spoke to He Donglu. Of course it's possible to make a tattoo with extraordinary effects. But from the looks of it, the organizers aren't going to be as straightforward as cutting needles on the female's body. He Donglu raised his eyebrows when he heard this. Of course, it was his request to have Shi Wei undress. In reality, the grand banquet that was coming soon had prerequisites arranged. The participating guests would have to compete in the progress of the missions. Once they won, they would possess high authority in the grand banquet. They could even become the legendary emperor of the party. This would have an enormous effect on raising his prestige in the circle. The theme of this year's grand banquet was Night of Mystery. It was clear that the mystic arts would dominate. It was said that it involved a bit of black magic and the like. The prerequisites for the male guests were uniformly interesting tattoos. They had to be completed on the bodies of their female companions and prey. Victory was determined by quantity. Frankly speaking, He Donglu didn't expect Luo Nan, who was an abstinence type, to be able to solve his problem. He just used it as a gesture of intimacy, but he never expected Luo Nan to take it seriously. Perhaps Luo Nan felt that He Donglu had given up a favor to resolve the problem of the winter solstice challenge in order to send King of Symmetry. Alright, being able to be an emperor for once was certainly an enormous temptation. But I really did come here today to do proper business. He Donglu's heart was indescribably depressed, but he still put on a look of pleasant surprise. You figured it out. Probably. What move is it? Luo Nan thought for a moment, but he shook his head. I don't want to say. He Donglu nearly choked to death on the spot. He swallowed the dry air in his throat with great difficulty. He forced a smile and said, isn't it a bit too early to ponder over the competition for the mission? I'm not interested in the so-called mission. Luo Nan just felt that the organizers of the grand banquet had no lower limits in their thinking. He didn't want to dirty his mouth with those words, so he gave a simple explanation and didn't say anything else. I'll strangle you to death. Okay, I don't even believe it myself. He Donglu choked twice in a row. He wanted to get a bit angry, but when he looked at Luo Nan's wooden and childish face, it was hard for him to make excessive guesses. He could only console himself. Forget it. In any case, this is just the warm-up phase. There will certainly be further explanations in the future. With my resources, even if I can't compare to you professionals, it'll be fine if I put in a bit more effort. He Donglu glanced at the hot plate that had yet to be cut. He forcefully suppressed the emotions in his heart. Just like the main dish that had yet to be served, the theme of tonight's banquet had yet to be truly spoken. If he were to lose his young master's temper at this time, he would be whipped to death by his old man later. Originally, he wanted to wait until they tasted the main dish before entering the topic, but now he had to do it ahead of time. He Donglu grinned and warmed up his facial muscles. Then he immediately took out an exaggerated tone. Professionals. You can't help but admire them. Especially people like you. Just now on the first floor, I've gained new knowledge. It's truly incredible. What's incredible? Shi Wei tidied up her clothes. Her face was smiling like a flower. She was familiar with the venue. She was a very good partner, so she took out her curiosity and inquired at the right time. He Donglu asked curiously, you didn't see? Oh, you went to take care of that little Barbie. That's truly a pity. You don't know this, but when Brother Luo entered the hall on the first floor, at least a third of the people stood up in a hubbub. They all called him Teacher Luo. How could it be like this? Shi Wei's professional acting skills allowed her astonished and amazed posture to be on point. In comparison, He Donglu's flattering technique was quite lacking. Plus, he was a layman to begin with. No matter how vivid his words were, it would only make Luo Nan feel awkward. There was no better effect. Luo Nan looked at his watch. Right when he was thinking about whether or not he should give a few words of warning, He Donglu finally ended his introduction under Shi Wei's hint. He rubbed his hands and entered the main topic. Hey, I'm a layman. There are some things that I can't explain clearly, so I won't say too much and make a fool of myself. I just need to show my admiration. Then let's have a straightforward. The hedonistic young master played with the tone of the Jianghu quite well. Luo Nan felt that these words were more pleasing to the ear than the previous words. He nodded and said, "Just say it. It's like this. I've heard news these past few days. It's about the demonstration equipment related to classroom number 14, demonstration equipment." Luo Nan was stunned. He really didn't understand. It was the day before yesterday or the day before yesterday. You made a few bracelets and distributed them. You said you were experimenting with the dynamo core. A certain person's mouth was full of layman's words, but Luo Nan understood the meaning. For the sake of He Yuan's face, Luo Nan simply corrected him. That's not a demonstration equipment. It's not a dynamo core either. It's just a test product that simulates the effects of the dynamo core. It's similar to an integrated chip. It's a tool that coordinates the operation of the blood intent ring. He Donglu actually didn't understand, but he seized the opportunity to slap his thigh. Oh right. It's this. It coordinates the blood intent ring. Speaking of which, brother, do you have any plans to mass-produce this toy? Luo Nan went, oh. He repeated the positioning from before. This is just a test product. If there's a market, then it's called a product. He Donglu wasn't good at this, but he was used to being a hedonistic young master. He really had a heroic spirit of his own. Let's be frank. My family wishes to cooperate. Brother, you just need to nod your head, and we'll immediately sign the contract. If there's anything you're dissatisfied with, I'll pull my old man over to talk. Luo Nan responded unhurriedly. I'm still researching the details. I've been making progress all this time. I've already explained the specifics to Sister Yuan. Cough. Don't you find my sister's personality troublesome? Huh? Luo Nan shot a glance over, and He Donglu immediately put on a wide smile. I'm saying that her status in the military and the society are already quite subtle. Adding us to the mix, it won't be easy to coordinate. Plus, with her personality, she always has to be within the framework. Isn't it good to be within the framework? He Donglu nearly couldn't continue. Luckily, he remembered that this aspect was discussed in the rehearsal. He said, efficiency. It depends on efficiency. Especially when it comes to your research. It's like the difference between a public laboratory and a private laboratory. If you share a piece of equipment with someone, you have to arrange the time and take turns. Isn't that inconvenient? Plus, the branch's resources are within the framework of headquarters. The two sides don't have a good relationship right now. It's hard to avoid restraining each other. It's hard to guarantee the privacy of some projects. But if you have a private laboratory. Chapter 584. The jeep crushed through the night, speeding along the high-speed magnetic rails on the outskirts of Xia City. Clara was silent the entire way. She was also in a daze the entire way. She only came back to her senses a bit when she saw that they were about to meet the splendid lights of the city. This was due to Bai Yu's message reminding her. Where are we? Don't turn around. It's freezing me to death. Bai Yu's message was followed by an emoticon of teeth chattering and shivering inside an ice cube. Clara couldn't help pursing her lips into a smile. She looked at the night outside and used the virtual keyboard to reply, we've already entered the rooftop area. The virtual keyboard's luminous effect flickered in the back seat. The little girl always loved to design a few gorgeous colors. She usually felt that they were quite gorgeous, but when she saw the slender figure and the calm and serious face of her peer under the gaudy colorful lights, Clara suddenly felt that the spacious back seat of the car had become cramped. The complicated emotions she had suppressed with great difficulty in the previous half hour were like the flickering lights in the car. They were completely exposed before the eyes of others. At least that was what Clara believed herself to be. She subconsciously held her breath and turned off the keyboard. She wanted to return to her previous state of silence. The person next to her seemed to turn his head to glance at her. It also seemed that he didn't, but Clara felt her entire body become sensitive. Her slightly curled long hair touched the exposed nape of her neck. It was clearly a bit damp. The 20-minute car ride had yet to dry the humidity of the villa's hot spring. It was just like the weeds in her mind. Back then, Wei had intentionally or unintentionally hinted that her own fantasies, including her preparations to abandon herself to despair, appeared absurd and lowly in front of the magnanimous actions of her peer, whom she had only interacted with for half a day. Clara still didn't know, or perhaps she didn't want to know, whether or not Luo Nan understood her preparations. She could only hang her head like a quail. She allowed her fantasies and illusions to weave into a net in the darkness, tightly binding her head and chest. She found it hard to breathe. The incorporeal needle of time suddenly sped up and then slowed down, teasing and tormenting her to its heart's content. This feeling, which could only be experienced by herself, seemed to be even more unbearable than the conflict outside the restaurant an hour ago. Until the jeep reached its destination. "That's by you." Luo Nan finally opened his mouth. The jeep cut into the city road as he spoke, slowly stopping by the side of the road. Bai Yu, who had wrapped herself up like a hairy ball, was hopping around under the streetlights. She saw a small tank-like SUV come over, and she subconsciously jumped back a step. Only then did she see the car door open. Luo Nan, dressed in thin casual clothes, got off the car. Clara came down from the other side and circled around the back of the car. Bai Yu immediately pounced over and hugged Clara as she called her idiot over 10 times. Clara originally thought she had overcome the most difficult hurdle, but as soon as she heard Bai Yu's words, the emotions hidden in the corner of her heart broke through the dam. She hugged Bai Yu and started crying again. Luo Nan was truly helpless when faced with this sort of situation. He immediately had thoughts of fleeing far away. He watched as Clara wholeheartedly hugged Bai Yu and cried. Bai Yu came back to her senses a little, so he focused his voice and whispered in her ear, "Your house is nearby, right? Clara, take care of him. Call me if anything happens." Bai Yu was dressed like a hairy ball, and she still had to hold Clara, who was crying so hard that her body went soft. She swayed back and forth, struggling quite a bit. She couldn't help but open her eyes wide when she saw Luo Nan actually shake his hand and leave. But she was unable to criticize him, so she could only pout, "My house is right behind me. Don't you want to go sit? I have an appointment with someone. I'll be leaving first." Luo Nan didn't have the leisure to watch the two girls hug each other and cry bitterly. Plus, he wasn't lying. His daily schedule was packed to the brim. He really did have to meet with an important person in a bit. He turned around to leave, but he saw Bai Yu being hugged by Clara. Bai Yu looked like she couldn't even move a single step. He thought for a bit and finally decided to do something good to the end, "Get in the car. I'll take you guys to your house. Clara, you're going to sleep at your kid's house today, right?" Bai Yu let out a puff of white steam. "Oh my, I nearly thought I was going to dribble the ball and run." The young girl had no filter on her mouth, and her analogy was gravely wrong. This actually caused Clara to be unable to continue crying for a time. Luo Nan was helpless. He could only invite the two girls into the car and let Bai Yu lead the way. They drove to the residential area in the back. Clara was much more relaxed now that she had a friend by her side. Right now, she was curled up in Bai Yu's embrace. She was no longer crying, but she was a bit drowsy and sleepy. This was most likely the after effects of her rapidly relaxing mental tension. Clara was between Luo Nan and Bai Yu, so it wasn't convenient for them to talk. But after thinking for a bit, he took advantage of Clara curling up to indicate Bai Yu to come closer. He reminded her in a low voice, "She's quite lucky. She didn't suffer a huge loss. Just remember this. Also, I didn't tell Brother Haijing about today's matter. Don't be happy too early." Luo Nan felt stifled when he saw Bai Yu's relieved appearance. This girl didn't know how many people were tormented by this matter tonight. He coughed lightly. You guys need to pay attention. Xia City hasn't been peaceful lately. It seems like some sort of virus is spreading. My sister is also in this circle of yours. It really is very complicated. The more you make friends like this, the more cautious you need to be. Otherwise, you'll be caught off guard. I'll help you guys get in touch later. You guys can all go get your bodies checked. Bai Yu's eyes widened once more when she heard the arrogance of his age and seniority. She hated that she couldn't open her mouth and bite a certain someone. But at this time, God's off-road vehicle accurately stopped outside of Bai Yu's house. Luo Nan didn't give Bai Yu a chance to speak. He drove the two girls out of the car and drove away. Behind him, Bai Yu fiercely waved her fist at the taillights of the car. Luo Nan could only shrug and look at his watch. It wasn't even 9:00 in the evening. Their schedule was quite frugal. That's right. Ever since He Dongluo's request for cooperation was rejected by him, the rest of the meal relied entirely on Shi Wei's top-notch level of communication. Only then were they able to enjoy themselves to the fullest. The duration of this meal wouldn't be too long. It ended around 7:30 p.m. Then came the examination of Clara and sending her off. Most of the time was spent on the road. Luo Nan sighed and rubbed his head. His thoughts weren't particularly smooth. He felt that it was strange when they talked about cooperation during the meal. The relationship between He Yueyin and the He family seemed to be a bit more distant than he imagined. He Yueyin was clearly the one who transferred the invitation this time as a middleman. Ever since the lecture on the 14th, Luo Nan's private communications had always been in friend and family mode. Anyone who wasn't in his address book would automatically be rejected. It was all thanks to He Yueyin that He Donglu was able to contact him. And it was because of this that Luo Nan looked down upon He Donglu, or perhaps the He family behind He Donglu, who wanted to start a new business. If it weren't for the fact that the young master of the He family had resolved the winter solstice challenge, Luo Nan wouldn't even be bothered to smile at He Yueyin. Luo Nan pondered for a moment. He felt that he still needed to communicate with He Yueyin. At the very least, he needed to report today's situation. He directly dialed He Yueyin's Hexayer number. This time, the call connected very quickly. Mr. Luo. Sister Yueyin, I've met with He Donglu. The greeting gift he gave me was quite good. He resolved the matter of Gym Master Xiu's Winter Solstice Challenge. However, looking at his intentions, he wants to obtain the technical authorization for the brick, produce it, and sell it on the market. I didn't agree. The so-called brick was the bracelet mentioned during the meal. It was the imitation dynamo core device that Luo Nan had designed for the sake of consolidating the results of the blood intent ring. Why did he choose this code name? One reason was because the blood intent ring's original name was Fortress. It could be considered a brick and a tile when dismantled. The other reason was because Luo Nan was ridiculing himself. The technical content of this toy wasn't high. Luo Nan felt that it wasn't even comparable to the elementary dynamo core product in Gym Master Xiu's Tai Chi ball. It was barely at the level of the integrated chip that imitated the functions of the dynamo core in the burner simulator system of Frost River Reality. It had a weak structure, a single function, a low-quality product rate, and a high failure rate. The frame of the blood intent ring was still floating in the abyssal region. It did have a bit of a guiding effect. Otherwise, it would have been too heavy to use as a toy. From Luo Nan's perspective, this brick was the most standard of failed products. It had the backing of the virtual brain system. It had a detailed user manual as a foundation. He had copied and copied, but the first product he created was actually this toy. He himself was ashamed to the point of being flustered, let alone others. So when He Donglu brought up the matter of cooperation with this thing, Luo Nan felt that it was a slap in the face from his perspective. Even if He Yueyin wasn't there to separate them, he would still pass it in the first instant. He Yueyin did not inquire about the reason or the details regarding Luo Nan's decision. This was her special quality that made people feel comfortable. She absolutely wouldn't waste her breath on things that had already happened. She just used the most practical angle to cut in and seek a more appropriate solution. Dong Lu is just expressing his attitude. There's no harm in refusing. It won't affect the He family's overall attitude. I remember Mr. saying that you wish to further perfect the design of the brick. If the current research and development conditions provided by the branch are able to satisfy your needs, then there's no need to be in a hurry to deliver the results. We can avoid being distracted. Luo Nan felt that He Yueyin had spoken to the bottom of his heart. With 2 hours of dinner time tonight, he could do anything. Of course he could cut off the winter solstice challenge. This bit of price was worth it. Luo Nan naturally had to express his gratitude. In any case, I will certainly be indebted to you for helping me resolve Gym Master Xiu's troubles. I've spoken to He Donglu. Sister Yueyin, you might as well help me pass on the message. Luo Nan's words actually contained the meaning of, I only recognize you from the He family. It could be considered a small gesture of support. But He Yueyin just replied, Donglu only needs to say it once. Besides, this is what the He family should do. Luo Nan didn't understand these words. Then He Yueyin changed the topic. Mr. Luo, I've already sent over the latest information regarding the investigation of the mutant infection. It mentions that although Lan Lin is a carrier of the virus, the relevant departments have already made him harmless after the incident at the municipal plaza on the 17th of last month. We can basically eliminate the possibility of him becoming a source of transmission again. Chapter 585. It was already 9:45 p.m. by the time Luo Nan walked into the house. The clear sound of the zither passed through the door and entered his ears before he even entered the door. The subtle sound of him opening the door was also completely drowned out by the bright and lively sound of the strings being plucked. It was to the extent that in the living room, besides Rui Wen, who was sitting in a standard posture on the piano stool facing the door, no one else noticed his arrival. A family concert. Even though Luo Nan's mood couldn't be considered all that great, he still relaxed a bit. He quietly changed his shoes in the entrance hall and walked into the warm living room. Right now the entire family was gathered around the sofa in the living room, aside from Luo Nan who had just returned. His uncle and aunt sat on the main sofa, shoulder to shoulder, with their backs against the door. Only the back of their heads was exposed. Mo Peng sat on his aunt's side. He rested an arm on the armrest and swayed back and forth, but his body was sprawled on the carpet. He was very comfortable. But in terms of comfort, it still belonged to Mo Ya, who occupied one side of the sofa and the chaise lounge. This sister didn't have a proper posture when lying down. She didn't have a proper posture when sitting. Her slender waist rested on the armrest. Her long legs were half bent and half straight. She was so idle that it made one's hair stand on end. Yet she still held the guitar. Her fingers and the plectrum plucked the guitar strings back and forth. She was as agile and dazzling as ever. This song was adapted from a classic rock song. Mo Ya had returned to her old profession and was in charge of the melody. Luo Nan listened to this part. The interludes and gorgeous polyphonic interpretation, and even the finger-picking techniques were used. The rich timbre and improvisational variations perfectly verified the high validity of the nickname, Finger Palace. Compared to Mo Ya, Rui Wen sat upright under the cover of Mo Ya's gorgeous melody. Not only was her posture much more rigid, she mostly strummed the strings, and she occasionally broke down the chords back and forth. She also appeared much simpler. However, the metal strings beneath her fingers vibrated slightly. The resonant amplification of the single-panel box allowed the deep and penetrating timbre to be divined out. This was probably the best standard that the mid-range practice guitar in her hands could achieve. What was even more beautiful was the precise control. It could be said that she had firmly grasped Mo Ya's nearly casual and colorful rhythm. So much so that Luo Nan was nearly unable to distinguish whether the rhythm carried the melody, or whether the melody carried the rhythm. The song was quite simple, but it was almost perfect for two guitars. At the end of the song, before Mo could comment, Mo Peng was already cheering loudly and praising, Rui Wen's rhythm is unparalleled. I-oh. Speak properly. Luo Shuqing slapped her son's scalp. Mo Peng didn't even have time to complain when Rui Wen stood up from the piano stool. She nodded her head in greeting towards Luo Nan. Only now did the others see Luo Nan enter the door. Luo Shuqing also stood up. She looked up at her watch and frowned. It's almost 10 o'clock. You've been wandering outside all day. How did you learn from Mo Peng? Mom. Mo Peng was just about to prop himself up, but he didn't have any strength left. He was filled with grief and indignation. I go home on time every day. Why aren't you worried that Nanster will lead me astray? Go upstairs and sleep. Luo Shuqing gave her son a light kick. She had the heart to instruct Luo Nan a few more times, but when she thought of the special circumstances her nephew was in right now, she was unable to continue for a time. Luckily, her husband spoke up at this time. It's already 10 o'clock. Rui Wen has practiced the piano for nearly 2 hours. She must be tired. Everyone should go to sleep. Yep. Nan needs to adapt to the new rhythm as soon as possible. You're still young. Learning to enrich yourself and laying down your foundation is the most important thing. You need to calm your heart. Luo Nan obviously knew what his 2 elders were worried about. He went, yep. He didn't make any empty promises. He was just like he was in the past. He was an introverted and quiet child. If he could really be the same inside and out, then that would be the most gratifying result for his aunt and uncle. Okay. Everyone wash up and go to sleep. Rui Wen can consider going on stage with me this weekend. Mo stood up as well. She grabbed her guitar and stretched her back. She even waved her hands twice in passing, emitting a humming sound. Luo Shuqing couldn't find her daughter pleasing to the eye no matter how she looked at it. Going up with you to swing a sledgehammer? If we really do swing, then we'll be excellent idols. Mo walked barefooted, giggling as she walked upstairs. She was completely unaware that her unintentional words had caused Luo Nan to subconsciously frown. 5 minutes later, Luo Nan knocked on Mo's door. A few seconds passed before Mo opened the door for him. She wore only a thin nightgown and her hair draped over her shoulders. She clicked her tongue twice. What a rare guest. It seems like a certain someone hasn't come to visit since he's no longer lacking in funds. That must be the reason why you ran away from home for nearly 2 months. The corner of Luo Nan's lips twitched as he retorted. He walked straight inside. He wasn't in the mood to joke around with Mo. Mo indicated for him to sit on a chair by the window. She sat on the edge of the bed with her legs bent. She casually fiddled with her hair. What's wrong? You look like you're suffering from a deep hatred. Did you hear some annoying news from your circle? You could say that. It was easy to talk with smart people. Plus, Luo Nan didn't have any misgivings about many things since he exposed a few of his true circumstances. He didn't need to beat around the bush. My circle is fine. But it's best to be a bit more careful when you're in your circle. There's news that to be exact, in your company, there's at least one, maybe many virus carriers. HIV. It's even worse than that. Luo Nan extended his hand and gestured at Mo's head. Something that can grow horns on your head, cover your body in scales, and grow a tail on your butt. Mo was stupefied. Then she reacted, mutant? In this era, the threat that mutants could bring about, from reality to rumors, were all sorts of assaults that disturbed people's thoughts. Mo's reaction wasn't out of the ordinary. Luo Nan recalled the information he had just obtained from the branch's data. He felt that it was useless to talk about these things too much. It was most important to let Mo clearly understand where the source of danger was. Your company has already confirmed that the infected and carrier is Ji Qiong. Of course, she's already under control. There's also a suspected case right now. We're currently tracking and controlling it. Yeah. It's that excellent idol, Lan Lin. Ji Qiong. Lan Lin. Moya pondered for a moment. A smile rippled from the corner of her lips. I have a rough idea. It seems that this virus is transmitted through sexual channels. Couldn't women be a bit more reserved these days? Luo Nan choked for a moment. He was a bit speechless towards Moya's sensitivity, but he still had to say what needed to be said. It's basically like this. But we can't eliminate the possibility of other routes of transmission. I'm mainly worried about your band. They don't pay attention to their private lives. According to our intelligence, electroharpies has been quite active recently. You're too close to them. You must be careful. It's best if you rest for a while. TSK. Your circle is quite professional when it comes to intelligence. It doesn't seem like you're messing around. You guys are the ones who are messing around. I don't deny it. Moya spoke casually. She naturally straightened her toes and did a sideways stretch. It was quite normal, but her current attire and posture made the corners of Luo Nan's eyes twitch. Hey, I'm being serious. I'm being very serious too. You want me to be careful and keep my distance. You want me to call for help if I encounter any problems. I want to be a bit less active recently. Isn't that all? Also, do a body check. Luo Nan sent an address to Moya. Make a trip here. Investigate the risks, just in case. You've thought quite thoroughly. A scholar who hasn't seen for 3 days has a whole new level of respect for you. Moya returned to her cross-legged sitting position. Her body leaned forward slightly. Then how did you think about the matter with Ruiwen? Ruiwen. Luo Nan couldn't turn his train of thought for a time. What's wrong with Ruiwen? You arranged Ruiwen's grade and class. Did you pay attention to her studies or her mental state? Luo Nan still didn't understand. She's only been at school for a few days. Is she tired of studying? Luo Nan spent all day with Ruiwen at Acumen College. He didn't discover anything abnormal. He didn't believe that anyone could discover any changes in Ruiwen's mental state. The smile on Moya's face faded. I want to ask. How can a child with only 3 to 4 years of memories keep up with the 7th grade curriculum? Luo Nan opened his mouth to speak, but he was unable to make a sound for a time. That's right. He knew that Ruiwen's relatively clear life memories were only about 3 years. At most, it wouldn't exceed 5 years. And within that time, the laboratory and the fighting arena made up nearly all of her elements. Of course this was abnormal. But Luo Nan knew that Quantum Corporation had installed special equipment in Ruiwen's brain when he rescued her from Jack's hands. It was used to control accidents. Under these circumstances, modifying and erasing memories wasn't something hard to understand. The relevant research of the Xia City branch also showed that it was practically impossible to form a complete personality with 3 to 5 years of memories. So there was reason to suspect that Ruiwen should have possessed a relatively mature behavior pattern early on. It was just that the relevant memories were all erased by Quantum Corporation. Ruiwen's current situation was formed on this basis. With Quantum Corporation's methods, the only way to find out about Ruiwen's past situation was to flip through their database. But there was already a slim chance of completely recovering her past memories. It was useless to tell Moya too much about this complicated matter. Moya's focus wasn't on this. She only has 3 to 4 years of memories, and she only has the ones from the underground fighting arena. This means that Ruiwen's learning foundation is practically zero. Even though she's very smart, it would be very difficult for her to catch up in a short amount of time. What's more, everyone can see that her energy and interest aren't on this. Luo Nan could only admit it. That's right. I don't really understand the situation in your circle. I can only ask you, do you think she'll be able to live a normal life in another 10 years with the current trend? What I mean is that she'll have a normal social circle. She'll become a complete person in society. She won't just live on a certain side. Why do I feel like you're talking about her being a gangster? Though Luo Nan said this, he felt quite diffident in his heart. Rui Wen's current abilities were more than enough to live on. But if she were to live freely in society with a complete personality, Luo Nan couldn't imagine such a scene for the time being. Chapter 586. Luo Nan came out from Mo Ya's room. His eyebrows were locked. He had originally come to warn Mo Ya. He never thought that he would end up with a head full of thoughts. He understood Mo Ya's intentions. This sister saw Rui Wen's talent in music and wanted to bring this little girl into the profession. Luo Nan had to admit that Mo Ya had a good eye. The essence of music was organized sounds. Any sound could be summed up as the vibration of an object. And Rui Wen's body and soul were mixed together. Inside and outside were one. This was the highest form of vibration that Luo Nan could currently recognize. This realm of using simplicity to control complexity was indeed a talent that no one could reach when used in the path of music. The technical discussion could be discussed later. Luo Nan was thinking that rather than letting Rui Wen painstakingly catch up to her peers and forcefully assimilate into normal society, it would be better to display her strong points and put on a layer of disguise in the normal world. Rui Wen was still young. He could wait and let her decide for herself. But he thought a bit more. With Rui Wen's temperament, she might not be able to express her thoughts clearly even if she had them. Preparing for a rainy day wasn't wrong. Luo Nan thought too much. His mind was a bit muddled. Legally, Mo Haihang and Luo Shuqing were Rui Wen's guardians. But in reality, Luo Nan was the one who truly needed to bear the responsibility. Any decision he made could affect Rui Wen's entire life. This was real pressure, and there was no outlet for it. Perhaps only by watching Rui Wen slowly form her ideal appearance would he have the chance to breathe a sigh of relief. Luo Nan walked toward his own room. He had just taken 2 steps when he subconsciously turned his head. He saw that the door to the small room on the west side of the 2nd floor was closed. He hesitated for a moment, but he still walked over. He hesitated in front of the door for half a second. In the end, he decided not to be hypocritical. He skipped the process of knocking on the door and pushed it open to enter. This was Rui Wen's room. The room wasn't large, but it was decorated with care. It was mainly a warm and simple beige color, probably to neutralize Rui Wen's cold colors. This was the handiwork of his aunt and Mo Ya. There was no one in the room right now, but Luo Nan didn't find it strange. He continued to walk inside. The biggest reason he chose this room for Rui Wen was that there was a small, open balcony on the west side of the 2nd floor. Rui Wen was on the balcony right now. Luo Nan entered the balcony. The first thing he saw wasn't Rui Wen, but Ink, the enormous bald crow. It hooked its claws on the edge of the balcony railing and spread its wings, making a rustling sound. It had been a long time since this guy took medicine, but under the nourishment of the closed production line, its body grew larger and larger. Its claws and wings were powerful, and its feathers were glowing. If it wasn't for its short and blunt beak, people would believe that it was an eagle when it spread its wings and flew. Yes, this small balcony of about 4 to 5 square meters was Ink's new residence, and it was the most convenient place for Rui Wen to hook up with it. Beyond Ink's half-spread wings, a crescent moon hung in the western horizon, casting down dim light that decorated this dark domain. Looking further down, he saw Rui Wen. Under Ink's wings, the girl leaned against the railing of the balcony and sat on the ground with her legs bent. Just like Emoya, she wore a thin shirt that exposed her calves and bare feet. The cold of the winter night had no effect on her. Rui Wen's eyes were closed, and she still held the practice zither in her bosom. She casually plucked the strings, and the soft and cool melody of a single note was like a breeze in the night. It brushed across Luo Nan's face, causing a wave of subtle tremors to rise on his skin. But when he carefully experienced it, it was like the rippling ripples of a river. It was so clear that the bottom could be seen, but there was a vacant emptiness within. Luo Nan could sense the regular deformations of the vibrational waves of the metal strings as they penetrated through the texture of the zither board, but he was unable to experience the part that belonged to a person under this transparent and clear tone. He was already used to this sort of Rui Wen, but Mo Ya's words crossed his mind. He couldn't help but have a different feeling grow in his hair. The balcony was very small. It could only fit Rui Wen by herself. Luo Nan didn't move forward. He stopped at the junction between the room and the balcony, and he half knelt in front of Rui Wen. Rui Wen must have felt Luo Nan approaching her, for she opened her eyes. Her deep and serene pupils were bottomless, and he couldn't see the emotions that a normal person should have. It was just like the sound of the zither flowing under her fingers. Luo Nan was a bit dazed when he saw these eyes. Right now Rui Wen was like the silent curtain of night outside the balcony. She was perfect like a painting, but she had completely blended into the background. There wasn't a single vivid focus. Her thoughts, hobbies, inclinations, ideals, and even her selfish desires were all buried beneath these dark pupils. Or perhaps there was simply nothing beneath them. What could be assembled from 3 or 4 years of memories? Not even a bit of it was forgotten. Jack. The underground fighting arena. The laboratory. Death. Luo Nan didn't want to think any deeper. The matter was far from being as simple as it was when he first made his decision. Perhaps Rui Wen's way of surviving in society had never been a difficult problem. It was how to let her live a high quality of life. Just like all parents hoped, to let their children live freely, happily, and with dignity. This was the crux of the problem. But could the Rui Wen before his eyes really do it? If she couldn't, then how should he adjust? Luo Nan was really a bit stupefied. He was in a daze, and Rui Wen just looked at him like this. Her fingers were still plucking the strings, but it was a subconscious action. Right now Rui Wen was like a robot doll waiting to be inputted with commands. That, Luo Nan spoke half a sentence, and his mind became even more stuffy. His originally unformed words were completely blocked up. The void vibrated during his moment of stupor. The minute signs were like the sound of thunder from the distant sea and sky. It was very hard for ordinary people to hear, but it transmitted information from the restless lagoon. This was someone's summons, telling Luo Nan that he had arrived. Hurry up and fulfill the contract. The plucking stopped. Of course Rui Wen could feel the vibrations in the void. She had gotten used to it over the past few days, so she put down the guitar and made preparations for her next move. Ink felt the change in the atmosphere and spread its wings to fly up. The scene in the curtain of night turned from stillness to stillness, and Rui Wen turned from a doll to a soldier on standby. She was no longer in a daze. But was this the state that a girl should be in? Then again, what should a normal girl, no, a normal state be like for someone of the same age? It seemed that Luo Nan himself didn't have a set of rules. Luo Nan really couldn't think of what to do next. He got up in a bit of a sorry state. Yeah. Let's finish tonight's practice first. Rui Wen nodded slightly. Her figure turned incorporeal, and she merged into the depths of the curtain of night right before Luo Nan's eyes. Luo Nan was stupefied for a few seconds before he picked up the guitar that Rui Wen had tossed onto the balcony. He carried it back into the room, gently leaning against the wall as he put it down. He didn't grasp the angle of the guitar well when he put it down, and the body of the guitar collided with the wall. The guitar let out a buzzing vibration, turbid like his current mood. Half a minute later, Luo Nan lay on the bed in his room. He closed his eyes, and his terrible mood slowly settled down. What replaced it was a clarity and calmness that gradually approached instinct. Luo Nan's mind broke through the cage, piercing through the turbid mental region of the public. He entered the lagoon, a similarly chaotic and even more berserk domain. In the lagoon, the power structure that came from Ghost Eye was like a shining lighthouse amidst a violent storm. It marked the position and depth of extraordinaries, and it issued a provocation to Luo Nan, come. Let's fight another 300 rounds. After the 14th lecture ended, Ghost Eye Che-E displayed his specialty in being shameless. He claimed to have lost the wager and willingly stayed in Xia City to serve as Luo Nan's sparring partner. She wanted to squeeze out elements that could be used by Luo Nan from the cage theory that Luo Nan had elucidated and put into practice. She wanted to improve her own foundation and seek a new breakthrough. This was the judgment of Her Majesty Empress Wu. There was a 70 to 80% chance that it was true. For an extraordinary to cast aside his pride, there really weren't many people in this world who could do anything to him. Ghost Eye stayed in Xia City as he wished. In the outer seas, he trained with Luo Nan in the lagoon every night. No matter what his intentions were, Luo Nan needed a sparring partner like this. He needed it more than anyone could imagine. Luo Nan didn't immediately step forward to meet Ghost Eye's provocation. Instead, he calibrated his position and locked onto the depths of this chaotic storm zone. There was another target drifting erratically, and he poured the strength of his mind into it. A rigid barrier towered in an instant, and the impact of the storm was greatly reduced. Luo Nan entered the fortress constructed by the configuration of the Ring of Blood Intent. This structure was still simple and crude. It was the standard, big, stupid, and thick. Compared to Ghost Eye's extraordinary domain that spanned across the storm, it was quite lacking. But it was this kind of structure that formed the necessary foundation for Luo Nan's assault on the lagoon region. It was like a ship. It could carry a crew, and it could travel amidst the howling winds and huge waves. As Luo Nan's telepathy entered the fortress, the 100 or so telepathic thoughts that had been rather quiet within the area surrounding the fortress quickly became restless. The corresponding information was sprinkled to every corner of Xia City through the psychic wave network and a few other channels. In the blink of an eye, telepathic thoughts gathered one after another from every region of Xia City. Most of them were transferred through the psychic wave network. There were also a few who came through the bracelet that Luo Nan had distributed 2 days ago. In any case, the number of telepathic thoughts that came from different people within the fortress broke through the 500 mark in a short dozen seconds. This was pretty much the total number of ability users who could enter the fortress through the configuration of the Ring of Blood Intent after lesson number 14. Due to the pressure of the lagoon region's storm and the limitations of the extremely simple configuration, a considerable portion of ability users had their consciousness in a half-muddled state after entering the fortress. It was very difficult for them to communicate with others. They only retained their basic perception abilities. Only a few B-rank mental users, such as Gao Meng and Bamboo Pole, could maintain the flow of telepathic thoughts to communicate. But no one was chatting with Luo Nan at this time. For the 500 ability users within the fortress, every second in the lagoon region was incomparably precious. And Luo Nan and Ghost Eye's attack drill was a carnival that belonged only to them. That's right. This was a carnival. Luo Nan borrowed the strength of the fortress to blast Ghost Eye with his first shot. He pushed against the energy turbulence of the lagoon region, transmitting the destructive shock several dozen kilometers away. Chapter 587. The revelry didn't last too long. Approximately 30 minutes later, the supernatural attack from Ghost Eye above the abyss region was like the receding tide of seawater. It receded layer by layer until it was far beyond the limits of human perception. At the same time, Luo Nan, who was leading the operation of the fort, had his spirited aura vanish into the void. It was indistinct and undetectable. The evening demonstration ended here. Some of the ability users within the fort withdrew their consciousnesses. Some wanted to stay for a while longer. It was fine even if they just wanted to experience the feeling of the abyss region. As for the latter, they only needed around 100 people to barely support the fort. If they had less than this number, they could only go back to their homes and find their own mothers. Speaking of which, the standard of 100 people was nothing. For the ability users who were fortunate enough to participate in this matter, most of them were able to experience the magnificence of the abyss region in advance with a C-rank standard. They could ponder over the marvels of their own domain. Such a good thing was something they didn't even dare to dream of 5 days ago. It was only within the boundaries of Xia City that teacher Luo was keeping watch. It was only because of the incomparably marvelous ring of blood that they were able to construct this fort that they had this opportunity. At this very moment, the ability users of the Xia City branch, of course, were the lucky ones who participated in number 14 Luo Nan's lecture. They were the targets of envy, jealousy, and gnashing of teeth from the entire world. Just this sense of superiority was enough to bestow them with powerful motivation. Even though Luo Nan's bracelet had yet to be popularized, the cost of using the SVIP model of the psychic wave network was not cheap. The ability users of Xia City still relied on their surging enthusiasm to continue the operation of the fort until the latter half of the night. Only when most people were exhausted of energy and were forcefully kicked out of the psychic wave network did the fort stop. Early in the morning, the cold air and the morning mist of the seaside mingled together and swept through the city. The neon lights of the business district still illuminated the city's sky. A certain person who persisted to the end left a message on the forums of headquarters. I pulled an all-nighter in the fort again. I'm so tired. Then he fell into a sweet dream amidst the howls of Kill Xia Chui that filled the mountains and plains. He had no reaction to the sound of cars that gradually grew denser outside the window. A commercial vehicle that had been parked in the residential district for half the night started up and slowly drove out. The car itself was very ordinary, but the interior of the car was completely modified according to the layout of a high-end business car. Other than the driver's seat in the front, the middle and rear parts were completely open, with only 2 seats side by side, suitable for sitting or lying. The main color of the carriage was dark red. Most people were not used to this color, but the 2 people in the carriage were already used to this environment. Yin-Lu wore a suit with her legs together as she sat on the right seat, looking like a white-collared office worker. Her amber glasses couldn't conceal her beauty, but it changed her temperament a little. She operated the car's audio-visual system to display the updated electronic chart and said softly, "We've already conducted 2 rounds of observation on the targets recommended by Multifaceted. From the looks of it, he was indeed able to enter the abyss and carry out his consciousness activities. But the range is very limited, just like the devout believers of the order who have received the installation of the Sanguine Flame's willpower, they have ascended for a short period of time." Madame Halder gave the final answer. After a month, the leader of the Sanguine Order had once again set foot in the territory of Xia City. Right now, she was sitting on the left-hand side of the seat. Her face was expressionless, but she stuck out her pinky out of habit. Her blood-red fingernail lightly scratched the old wound on her cheek, feeling the slight itch and pain. Yin-Lu blinked her eyes behind her glasses. Even though Madame Halder was the first ablatum, what she said just now was a bit out of line. She lacked reverence for the Sanguine Flame's willpower. She was too close to the control faction. However, Yin-Lu didn't say anything. She continued to analyze the information, corroborating with Madame Halder's opinion. The car drove out of the residential district and followed the flow of traffic through the city of Xia City. Approximately 10 minutes later, in between reports, Yin-Lu looked out the window and said softly, "The central station is up ahead." Madame Halder also shot a glance out the window. She didn't say anything, but she took over the control of the audiovisual system. She cut off the chart and replaced it with an image from the surveillance system of Xia City. The date was the night of the 14th of this month. The image had already been processed to mark out a special existence within the flow of people. Actually, even without the marking, Madame Halder and Yin-Lu could quickly identify the target. They were all too familiar with the figure's back, including the clothes. Yin-Lu promptly switched to the main topic. "We're still checking the surveillance system of the station, but the target should be avoiding the cameras on purpose. We haven't found any valuable clues for now." She stumbled a bit, but in the end, she still chose the neutral word, target. Madame Halder didn't open her mouth from beginning to end. She just replayed the surveillance image over and over, all the way until the car passed through the city and arrived at a shipyard on the eastern coast of Xia City. This shipyard was the property of Xia City's City Defense Army. There was a sentry every few steps. The security was tight. But when Madame Halder's business car drove out of the security zone, there were already military guides waiting for them. They brought them into the factory. The road was green, and they passed unimpeded. Yin-lu sighed in her heart. The Blood Flame Order had always maintained a relatively close cooperative relationship with the military. Even though Tian Bang had relied on the resources of Team AB and the field army to catch them unprepared, the Order's deep-rooted network of relationships in Xia City for dozens of years had not completely collapsed. However, this network of relationships was like a rootless duckweed. Even a high-level member of the Order like Yin-lu found it hard to accurately estimate how much longer it could last. The car drove all the way to a certain shipyard by the sea. This was originally a spare factory for assembling coastal warships. Most of the equipment here had already been discontinued. They only borrowed the special environment of the shipyard to store a special creation that was hauled back from the sea. Madame Halder and Yin-lu got out of the car one after another. They only needed to raise their eyes to see the ash-gray hill floating in the sea below the shipyard. This hill was 15 meters high above the water's surface. Its complete volume was enormous, and its main structure was pieced together from all sorts of skeletal fragments. These bones were mostly fish bones, but they were abnormally tough. It was clear that they were the remains of a mutant. The method of piecing them together was very crude. Sharp spikes could be seen everywhere. If someone were to bump into it, there was a high chance that they would be pierced through by 10,000 arrows. This hill was the most obvious trace of the sea region where Jean Tong had either disappeared or died half a month ago. It was still a ghastly white in the video data. As time passed, the bones continued to change color. But in any case, it looked rather strange and frightening. Yin-lu had just sized it up a few times when someone called her. She swept her eyes over the number and immediately took 2 quick steps forward. She moved closer to Madame Halder's ear and said, "Sky General Entertainment. They're most likely here to discuss an acquisition." Madame Halder stared at the hill of bones. She simply waved her hand and walked forward. Yin-lu understood. She stopped where she was and spoke a few words with Madame Halder. After all, this wasn't a good time to negotiate. She simply set an appointment and hung up the phone. When she turned her head to look, Madame Halder was already being led by a military guide onto the workbench of the shipyard. She turned to the other side of the hill of bones. Yin-lu sped up, wanting to catch up to Madame Halder. But as soon as she stepped onto the workbench and turned a corner, she saw a rather familiar skinny face. That person happened to be blocking Madame Halder's path and was smiling as he spoke. When Yin-lu came over, his eyes lit up when he saw her dressed like an office lady. He winked at her and said, "Oh my, your order is always shouting about fighting and killing, but you never lack beauties. This person isn't inferior to you back then." Yin-lu opened her mouth, but a breath was stuck in her throat. She almost couldn't make a sound. It wasn't easy for her to catch her breath. She couldn't care about anything else. She immediately closed her legs and bowed. "Lord Ghost Eye. Why do you say I'm interested in meeting your order? That's a really cool way to address you." Ghost Eye was wearing a loose casual outfit and a pair of sneakers. He looked like an old morning jogger. He had a smile on his face and didn't look the slightest bit dignified as an extraordinary. But Yin-lu, who was right next to him, had a layer of cold sweat on her back. She had discussed with the military about a secret visit, but she just had to run into an extraordinary. Was this an accident, or was it something else? Compared to the uncouth Ghost Eye, Madame Halder was wearing a light gray retro windbreaker, a pair of goatskin gloves, and a silk scarf around her neck. She looked like a strong woman inspecting her own business, and she was indeed calm. "Brother Che, you worked hard last night and came ashore early in the morning. Why are you here? Oh my, are you trying to make me do my best?" Ghost Eye was still as uncouth as ever. He laughed and said, "I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Actually, I've been restraining myself lately. It's just that my neck has been cold. It's not very comfortable, so I decided to take advantage of the fresh air in the morning and go for a stroll. You don't believe me? If you don't believe me, you can come over and touch it." Ghost Eye's words were already quite unreliable, but Madame Halder actually took off her goatskin gloves and touched Ghost Eye's neck. She had a faint smile on her face. Your skin is warm. You don't feel too cold, or perhaps your meridians are blocked. Ghost Eye snorted, you're a Western woman with a high nose and deep eyes. Why are you talking to me about meridians? It's not that kind of feeling. It's like a blade being pressed against the back of my head. It's cold and sinister. TSK. It's not as comfortable as your little hand. Madame Halder ignored Ghost Eye's last words. She withdrew her hand and put on her gloves once more. She played down the situation and said, a blade pressed against the back of my neck. A murderous aura. Xia City has a free sparring partner like you. It's simply a business without any capital. Is there anyone who's dissatisfied with you? Chapter 588. Madame Halder and Ghost Eye sat on the workbench in the shipyard. It was as if they were talking in riddles, or as if they were old friends exchanging greetings. They did not exchange many words, and then, with smiles on their faces, they walked away, one going up, the other going down, and did not meet again. Yin-Lu followed behind Madame Halder. Aside from the initial greeting, she didn't say a word. She only knew that the two of them were talking about last night's drill in the Abyss area, but she couldn't guess the specifics. But what she could be sure of was that Madame Halder and Ghost Eye must have reached some sort of tacit understanding. Otherwise, why would they have to create a coincidental encounter in this military base for others to see when and where they could talk about such gossip? Yin-Lu lowered her eyes. A month ago, she was only one of the 2 deputy officiants in the order. But now that the traitor, Ren Hong, was dead, she was undoubtedly the first in line to inherit the position of officiant. Her position in the order had risen to an unprecedented height. But when did Madame Halder and Ghost Eye get in touch? The two of them had such a close friendship, but no matter what kind of difficult situation they were in, Madame Halder never revealed anything. Why was that? Yin-Lu had a subtle feeling in her heart, but no matter what, the benefits were immediate. No matter how dire the blood flame order was, having an extraordinaire appear and communicate with them in a friendly manner was an excellent card to play. The guiding personnel of the military were dumbfounded at this moment. To him, this was undoubtedly a very important piece of information. And when this information was sent to the military decision-makers, it would probably boost the blood flame order, which was currently in a rather passive position in D-City. Yin-Lu pondered over this in her heart, but since Madame Halder didn't say anything, she couldn't ask. A minute later, Ghost Eye, who had finished circling around the white bone mound, did not even say goodbye and just left. She finally calmed down and carefully observed the white bone hill that was right in front of her. In fact, the higher-ups of the blood flame order had already analyzed the white bone mound from all sorts of images and information. This time, they were seeing the real thing in person to verify their previous analysis. Yin-Lu soon confirmed that 99% of the White Bone Hill's structure was based on the Blood Soul Temple. As for the remaining 10%, it was just a deviation caused by the impact of the energy. Most importantly, even though it had been half a month, he could still vaguely feel the special spiritual waves radiating from it. Outsiders wouldn't be able to guess, but as the deputy officiant, Yin-Lu could tell at a glance that during the process of shaping the White Bone Hill, there had been an astonishing energy exchange. Within the church, this energy exchange was also called blood sacrifice. How could such a thing in such a form appear in the sea where Jin Tong disappeared or died? Could it be that it was really as some people had guessed, that the one who had already died in battle at the Aurora Cloud capital had revived using a secret technique? Yin-Lu did not voice out such a taboo guess. She remained silent until Mrs. Halder signaled for them to leave. Under the more cautious and respectful welcome of the military guides, the two of them got back into the MPV and drove out of the factory. In the car, Madame Halder had been resting with her eyes closed, or perhaps she was deep in thought. Only when they reached the highway did she open her eyes and speak. Luo Nan wants to kill someone. Yin-Lu was suddenly stupefied. Her thoughts had been swaying between the White Bone Hill and Ghost Eye. She hadn't thought of teacher Luo, whose name had already shaken the world even though he hadn't reached adulthood. She was a bit stupefied for a time. Luckily, she quickly came to her senses. Madame Halder and Ghost Eye had mentioned the drill in the Abyss region earlier. Luo Nan was the core character. But the matter of killing someone. Madam, who do you think Luo Nan wants to kill? Madame Halder took off her kid leather gloves and placed them on the armrest of her seat. Her right hand, which had just caressed the back of Ghost Eye's neck, opened and closed twice. She spoke a few seconds later. According to Ghost Eye's explanation, Luo Nan is using the drill and name to familiarize himself with the attack patterns of the Abyss region. In reality, he's using Ghost Eye as a simulated target. Since he's using Ghost Eye as a simulated target, it's very likely that the target is a mental type extraordinary. Yin Lu was speechless. She said after a while, even if he's practiced 100 or 1,000 times, he'll still kill extraordinaries as he pleases. Her voice suddenly cut off. Yin Lu thought of Jean Tong at this moment. Madame Halder's gaze stared at her own right hand. She muttered, Ghost Eye means that he can faintly sense a certain hidden threat. Perhaps that threat is Luo Nan's trump card in beheading Jean Tong. But Jean Tong is a fleshly type after all. It's very hard to completely imitate his previous experience. That's why he needs Ghost Eye as a live target. There are only 30 or 40 mental type extraordinaries under the heavens. Who could it be? Yin Lu didn't speak. She was still digesting Halder's judgment. Even though the logic was complete, it was still very hard for her to completely agree with it. Madame Halder didn't dwell too much on this matter. She most likely wanted to gather more information before making a judgment. However, she made a decision. Notify Sky General Entertainment. Let's shelve the negotiations over Mingtang Culture's acquisition. Madam. According to Multifaceted's explanation, Luo Nan and Mingtang Culture have quite a deep connection. We need to have a channel to facilitate contact. Yin Lu responded with a yes and immediately made a call to the negotiating side. She didn't care how astonished and angry the other side was. The matter was settled in less than a minute. When the call ended, Yin Lu was just about to ask for instructions when Madame Halder took the initiative to ask her, what do you think about Ghost Eye? Yin Lu was a bit startled. She didn't know what to say for a time. She simply shook her head. I haven't studied him in depth before. I don't dare to make a rash judgment. Madame Halder laughed soundlessly. She didn't bicker with Yin Lu. She continued, Ghost Eye seems to be frivolous, but he has everything an extraordinary should have. His judgment far surpasses that of a normal person. That's fine. When it comes to extraordinary cultivation, he's far more curious than the vast majority of extraordinaries. Correspondingly, he doesn't pay much attention to mundane matters. You need to remember this. Yin Li's heartbeat increased by a notch. There was no doubt that Madame Halder was deciphering the mysteries of Ghost Eye's relationship with her. To the Blood Flame Order, which lacked a core of extraordinaries and a sacrificial artifact to suppress them, this was an extremely important resource. Regardless of whether it was sooner or later, if she could learn the truth, it meant that Yin Li's position within the Order and in Madame Halder's heart had been further solidified. Yin Lu felt as if she had returned to the time when she received the Order's fundamental secret technique. She listened attentively to Madame Halder's every word and committed them to memory. There wasn't much information regarding Ghost Eye. It was nothing more than contact information, communication skills, personality analysis, and so on. Madame Halder only took 2 minutes to finish explaining everything. In the end, she sighed with emotion. Ghost Eye is the kind of person whose curiosity is greater than his ambition. He likes to meddle in other people's business and care about old relationships. Out of all the extraordinaries, he's practically the most suitable to befriend and rely on. It's just that the more favors are used, the thinner they are. In recent years, I've needed him, but he hasn't needed me. Our friendship of 20 years can only withstand 2 or 3 troubles. If it goes any further, it'll most likely not last. Yin Lu consoled, if we can get past this hurdle, the order will be promoted, and our status will be close. Perhaps, don't say these meaningless words. Madame Halder waved her hand. Rather than thinking about these useless things, it's better to think about how to clean up the loose ends in Xia City and open up the situation in T City. Yin choked up. She responded with a soft, yes. She couldn't continue for a time. The difficulties faced by the church after the relocation of their foundation had far exceeded their worst expectations. It had to be said that T City was an important city in the Pacific Ocean. Although it was far away from the major economic circles and was isolated overseas, it and Chan City were like horns to each other. They faced each other from a distance and just so happened to be two important strategic strongholds protecting the deep blue world. It was also one of the core offices of the current world government. The strategic location was admittedly good, but it was also a place where wind, clouds, dragons, and tigers converged. The government, the military, the capital, and the powers of the inner world intersected. For an outsider like the Blood Flame Order, it was far too difficult to take root there. Madame Halder had always viewed T City as an important backup base for the past decade or so. She had transferred many industries there and had a legal and reliable identity. But this could only guarantee their ability to survive in normal society. In the inner world, where power and foundation were valued, the Blood Flame Order was a secret order. Their foundation of believers was in a half-collapsed state. They were like rootless duckweed. If this was all, they could still immerse themselves in business and slowly plan. But they never expected that at this critical time, Chan City, which was supposed to be the most stable, would stir up trouble. The impact spread to T City as well. Gradually, there was chaos. Yinlu understood that under these complicated circumstances, Madame Halder had put down the multitudes of affairs in T City and returned to Xia City. Aside from dealing with the loose ends of moving out of Xia City, there was also a large part of it. Madame Halder saw that the situation in T City was difficult and hoped to find some external power that she could borrow. Right now, Madame Halder had found Ghost Eye, but this wasn't enough. Several minutes of oppressive silence persisted in the commercial vehicle until news from the outside came in. Yinlu received the latest intelligence from the Pacific Ocean. Calling it intelligence was a bit of a stretch. The news had just been released when it became the most explosive news in the inner world. The Ability User Headquarters and the Order of Justice have put aside their negotiations, but they immediately announced the news of a new plane to the outside world. Confirmed? What's the specific location? Yinlu felt a bit bitter in her mouth. Confirmed, but there's no specific location. We only suspect that it might be a subsidiary plane of the deep blue world. Madame Halder was silent. Yinlu paused. In the end, she couldn't help but speak again. T City is definitely within the exploration radius. According to the official exploration principles, the recruitment of personnel is imperative. There's also the expulsion and counterattack of the mutant species. Madam, our manpower and reserves can't afford to be tossed about. Chapter 589. Tomorrow was the winter solstice. It was the time of year when the night was the longest. The weather in Xia City hadn't been too good for some time now. At 5 o'clock in the evening, the sky had clearly darkened. Shadows flickered in the depths of the jungle on the north bank. Add to that the sharp or coarse cuz of the resident birds. Those who were a bit less courageous might not have the guts to walk on the forest paths. However, inside the gear building in the jungle, the public activity area on the second floor of the basement was brightly lit. Due to the lighting, the side of the waterway near the sandbar attracted quite a few fish and shrimps from the bottom of the lake. They stuck close to the glass wall and bumped into each other. As for whether it was interesting or strange, that would depend on the aesthetic of each person. None of the people who stayed here paid attention to this scenery. They sat around the bar counter, laughing and joking. The atmosphere was lively. Aha, serves you right. Shui Lei drank a bit of alcohol. Since he wasn't of legal drinking age, he lacked experience in this area. It was inevitable that he would get a bit drunk. Of course, the most important thing was that the difficulty of the winter solstice challenge had silently melted away. A large chunk of his mind had been swept away, and his bold and cheerful vigor had returned to his body. His voice grew increasingly resonant. This is what happens when you want to eat alone. Let's not talk about what happens over there. Big bro, I am going to enjoy the profits from inside. The one who was grabbing Shui Lei's shoulder was the CMO of Heavenly Crystal Biology R&D Company, Director Xie Junping. Shui Lei's face was already red from the alcohol. This marketing director, who had been in office for a month, was the one whose face was truly flushed red. His face could practically light up half the bar counter. Haven't you seen the energy sector these past 2 days? It's been going straight up and down without any twists and turns. Getting a sum of money at this time is an extreme operation. Intelligence, decisiveness, ability, and luck are all indispensable. Or should I say, ever since I got to know you guys, my luck has been off the charts. Those people from headquarters are courting death. They actually wanted to hide this sort of thing, and they weren't able to hide it. Shui Lei was already an outstanding member of the Xia City branch. His standpoint was extremely upright. He didn't hesitate in the slightest when he opened fire. Not many people knew about the storm that had suddenly arisen on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. The intelligence obtained by the Xia City branch only showed that Chan City's ability user headquarters and the Order of Justice had discovered a plane similar to the Deep Blue World for some unknown reason. It was said that the two sides were originally preparing to develop it in secret, but during the course of negotiations, such an important secret matter was inexplicably leaked. This sneak attack left both the ability user headquarters and the Order of Justice in a rather sorry state. Not only did they have to deal with the inquiries of various powers over the past 2 days, they also had to question the other party's ability to keep secrets and even their most fundamental attitudes. It was said that after the leak, the high-level talks between the two sides had ended on bad terms many times, and now the negotiations had been put on hold indefinitely, but the impact caused was hard to clean up. At first, everyone was a little confused, not sure if it was a fact or a rumor. Later on, even more detailed information was released, and there was even a piece of extremely critical and deadly information such as, the party involved does not have the exact coordinates. At this moment, everyone finally came back to their senses. You two haven't even figured out the situation yet, and you've already scratched each other's faces until they're covered in blood. It would be a waste not to see a joke, and it would be a waste not to take advantage. At that moment, the big and small investors all entered the market. Regardless of whether they could catch any fish or not, they had to muddy the waters first. The turmoil in the global stock market was just one side of it. Xie Junping, who was an outsider, had already taken the opportunity to take a bite out of it. Satisfied, he left to watch the show. But there were even more major forces and individual gamblers who were determined to be addicted to gambling for the rest of their lives. They were eager to get a few more pieces of meat on the Pacific Ocean, in the new dimension whose coordinates had yet to be determined. It's rare to be so free. Qin Ikuan, who had been diligently performing his duty, still didn't touch a drop of alcohol tonight, but he couldn't help but sigh at this moment. It must be said that Xia City had been in a state of chaos since the end of September. People from all walks of life rushed in and out of the city. They set up a stage to sing an opera. They tossed and turned with all their might. Now, the tables had turned. Whether it was headquarters or the Order of Justice, they had both fallen head first into the maelstrom. From the perspective of the people of the Xia City branch, such a situation was truly like a cold drink in the summer and a hot pot in the winter. It was a comfortable situation. He reached for the ice water in front of him. At this moment, Cat Eyes, who was temporarily acting as the bartender, called out from behind the counter. Jerry. With a whoosh, a fat brown figure leaped through the gap between Qin Ikuan's arm and the counter. It came to a screeching halt when it reached Cat Eyes. It stopped right in front of a cup of fruit juice that had just been concocted. It was a muskrat. Its iconic long tail was swinging on the table. Its tail was nearly 20 centimeters long. It was taller than the cup when it squatted normally. Since its head was small and its body was large, and there was no clear dividing line between the two, it looked quite fat. But among its kind, this size was still considered underage. It was already very close to Xie Junping and Xie Junping. Xie Junping was especially startled by it. But when Xie Junping turned his head and saw the big fat fellow in front of him, not only was he not annoyed, he laughed out loud instead. "See? I told you that this little fellow isn't an ordinary creature. I was screwed over by it back then." As he spoke, he reached out to touch it. However, the muskrat, who had been named Jerry, still maintained an extremely high level of vigilance. It twisted its body and circled to the other side of the cup. It even revealed its sharp incisors at Xie Junping. TCH, narrow-minded. Xie Junping still wanted to tease this little fellow, but Cat Eyes had already given him an order. "Send it to your mother." As Cat Eyes spoke, she gestured with her hands and pointed at the end of the counter where Rui Wen was sitting silently by herself. Jerry's flat head twisted back and forth twice, and its tail swung along with it. In the end, it actually lowered its body. Its front claws hooked onto the joint between the stem and the base of the cup. Its fat belly stuck to the table, and its long webbed hind legs exerted force. It advanced with difficulty towards Rui Wen in a nearly gliding manner. Its appearance was enough to make one howl. If Shui Lei had not pulled him back in time, Xie Junping really would have rolled over in laughter. This wasn't the first time Qi Nikuan had seen such a situation, but he still could not help but click his tongue in wonder. This isn't the intelligence a muskrat can have. Are you sure there aren't any abnormalities? The laboratory didn't find anything. Besides, as long as Rui Wen likes it, what problems could there be? What logic? Qi Nikuan was dumbstruck and speechless. The feeling faction and the reasoning faction couldn't be said together no matter what. At this time, a call came through. After Qi Nikuan took the call, he said a few words and then stood up. He turned his head and said, "Leister, help me move a few things." Shui Lei stood up. Xie Junping was not to be outdone. He swayed as he stood up, raised his hand, and said, "I'll help too." Qi Nikuan swept a glance at Xie Junping's physique. He didn't hold too much hope towards the results of this short month of training, but he still gave him a bit of face. He laughed and said, "2 people is enough. We'll be back soon." He pulled Shui Lei and rode the elevator up. Xie Junping was still a bit drunk. He was distracted for a moment and didn't follow. He could only sit down resentfully as he watched the elevator close. But when he turned his head, he saw Cat Eyes concentrating on mixing drinks. Rui Wen and Jerry were also in their own country. They didn't seem to care about anyone else. He felt that it was boring. He was also a bit scared. It was true that he liked beautiful women. Disregarding Rui Wen, Cat Eyes' image was very much his cup of tea. But the more he came into contact with the inner world, the more he understood the depths of it. It was best for him to stay as far away from such dangerous people as possible. Xie Junping simply got up again. He waited for the next elevator and went up as well. It was all right on the second underground floor, but when he reached the entrance hall of the first floor, the cold wind of the winter night blew and he couldn't hold on much longer. Finally, he still had a bit of reason left. He rushed to the edge of the small plaza in front of the door and vomited into the underbrush. Afterwards, his condition was much better. The strict training he had undergone during this period of time also showed results. He only wore a thin sweater and stood outside, but he didn't feel that cold. He surveyed his surroundings and borrowed the light from the door to illuminate the area. He could actually faintly see the depth of the jungle 6 to 7 meters in front of him. Even though it was still hazy, there were only 2 living things in that area, a bird and a beast. Neither of them could escape his senses. According to Dean Wan's words, he was already able to synthesize sound waves, smell, heat radiation, and many other perceptual differences. He was able to distinguish living things from the surrounding environment. According to the inner world's terms, this was spiritual sense. At this step, even though it was far from being an awakening, it could be said that he possessed a certain amount of extraordinary strength. Xia Junping could even barely tell that the bird that was slightly moving up and down on the branch was a crow. Of course, it was far inferior to ink. It seemed that his spiritual sense had improved again in the past 2 days. It was really smooth sailing. Yay! Xia Junping clenched his fists and jumped a few times in the cold wind to vent the excitement in his heart. Perhaps because his movements were too large, the crow at the edge of the forest tilted its head, as if it was sizing him up. Xia Junping whistled at the crow, but it didn't respond. Instead, at the end of the forest path on the other side of the plaza, Xue Lei's voice rang out. "Hey, why are you outside? I wanted to help, but I didn't expect you to run so fast." Xia Junping complained half-truthfully, but the next moment, he saw the sturdy and heavy metal box on Xue Lei and Qi Nikuan's shoulders that was half the height of a person. The rest of his words turned into a strange cry. F***ck me. This isn't grass, it's a precision component that's about to be destroyed by our teacher Luo. I think his credit limit must be in the negatives again. That's not necessarily the case. The SVIP model usage fee is still quite considerable. Lazy, you put on the bracelet at the first moment. It's inevitable that a full man doesn't know the hunger of a hungry man. Qi Nikuan unloaded the box that weighed several hundred kilograms from his shoulder like he was taking off his school bag and placed it in the hall. Only then did the box's load-bearing pulley come into play. Xue Lei did as he was told. Xia Junping came over and curiously touched the outer shell of the box, but he couldn't tell what it was. Chapter 590. No one took a crow that could be seen everywhere seriously. Xia Junping and the other two walked into the hall. The boxes weighing hundreds of kilograms made muffled sounds like thunder as they stepped on the ground. This is our teacher Luo. From Xue Lei's perspective, this bit of weight was nothing. But he had a problem with Luo Nan's way of doing things these past few days. It wasn't easy for me to get into the basics of Sansho. I've been messing up my schedule these past few days. I can't leave the front door, I can't take a step out of the back door. I'm probably going to slip down again, Xia Junping chuckled. He's reverting to his old ways. Didn't you say that he used to be like this? Qi Nikuan pressed the button to open the elevator and sent the box inside. After turning around, he also joined in on the conversation. Of course, he was mostly explaining, Mr. Luo is also striking while the iron is hot. After all, with such an impressive result like the Ring of Blood and Will, and with Ghost Eye as a sparring partner, this is a rare opportunity that cannot be missed. Xue Lei displayed his stance. He fiddles with these exoskeletons every day just to strike while the iron is hot. Qi Nikuan smiled and asked Xue Lei to move the other box into the elevator. At the same time, he raised his hand and shook it, showing the rather heavy metal bracelet on his wrist. This is also the result. As a physical body, I thought that I would never be able to touch the abyss in my life. I didn't expect Mr. Luo to be able to solve this problem so easily. This thing is now very popular. Xue Lei subconsciously shook his wrist. The weight on his wrist made him lose the confidence to continue speaking. He could only mutter, body and soul should be balanced. Such a good aptitude. Beep beep beep. The alarm of the elevator rang. After all, it was not a freight elevator. 2 metal boxes had actually exceeded the limit of 1,300 kilograms. All right, I'll use the one next to it. Xue Lei struggled to pull the box out again. At that moment, a call came through. Xia Junping helped him press the button. I'll go this way too. B6, right? After much difficulty, the elevator doors closed and the car descended. Xue Lei was on the phone the whole time. He hummed repeatedly and occasionally said words like Christmas or New Year's Day. By the time the elevator arrived, he still hadn't finished speaking. Xia Junping then helped Xue Lei pull out the box. At this time, Qi Nikuan was already waiting outside. He was swiping his authority, which was to verify his identity. Xie Junping felt a toothache when he saw this scene. A good portion of Gear's 7 basement floors were remodeled by Yan Hong during this period. Because he had always been engaged in highly classified research on the archetype format and the burners, these underground buildings had practically been transformed into a heavily guarded fortress by him. When Xie Junping and Luo Nan first came here, they suffered a loss due to the issue of authority. Whether it was him or Luo Nan, neither of them liked this sort of arrangement. They simply abandoned most of the defense systems when they took over. However, Luo Nan had clashed with headquarters last time, and Gear had been severely damaged by headquarters tank and the others. They had no choice but to consider the issue of safety when they repaired it. Plus, Luo Nan had been using Gear as a base for research these past few days. The corresponding defensive measures were reinforced layer by layer. This was especially true for the 6th floor, which was the main laboratory. The 7th floor, which contained the mainframe database, energy station, and other core installations, had already been built into a small fortress by the technical staff of the Xia City branch. It was said that according to these safety standards, even if an extraordinaire were to charge over, these 2 layers of the fortress would be able to hold out for 1 to 2 minutes. This was enough time for the Xia City branch to take the next step in providing reinforcements. Safety and convenience could not be balanced at the same time. The higher the safety factor, the lower the comfort factor. The 2 boxes of equipment parts were actually much simpler here. They were directly sent through a conveyor belt to the laboratory's warehouse for classification and inspection. The 3 of them just had to go through the inspection procedure step by step. They're really looking for trouble. Xie Junping had the authority to enter the laboratory, but he was seriously impatient with the complicated inspection process. At this time, he heard Shui Lei say, "The troublemakers are in the back." Tian Qi just called. He said that he couldn't get in touch with Nanster. He asked me to tell him that the Mystic Arts Research Society is going to conduct an end-of-year activity. They're going to organize a Mystic Arts theme week during Christmas and New Year's. The venue is set to be at Gear. Huh. According to Tian Qi, this should be a warm-up for the next semester's relocation. They want to take advantage of this opportunity to move some equipment over. All the functions that can be used have been activated, and the activity space has been expanded. F***CK. Why are these people causing trouble? Xie Junping raised his wrist. He wanted to make a phone call and clarify the situation. However, he didn't have the authority to communicate on the 6th floor. He couldn't make the call at all. Shui Lei advised, "It's hard to say even if we get in touch. After all, this isn't Nanster's private property. The property belongs to the Mystic Arts Research Society. We can't say anything about when they move and how they move." As he spoke, Shui Lei turned to look at the brand new security equipment around them. Maybe Nanster needs to find another workshop. There's definitely room for discussion here. As the person directly responsible for Luo Nan's security, Qi Nikuan's tone was calm and certain. He didn't feel that this was a problem. Xie Junping went, Only now did he remember that Luo Nan had the Xia City branch behind him. If he were to put on a show and discuss with the Mystic Arts Research Society, the latter might not have any leeway to refuse. Levels. It was all a matter of levels. He also felt that this wasn't a big deal. It just so happened that the 3 of them had already passed their authority verification. He casually spat out, "Speaking of which, a workshop. Are you sure it's not a factory?" The 3 of them walked inside amidst their laughter. They passed through 2 more security gates before entering the core area of the laboratory. Upon entering, they discovered that behind the unfriendly and serious face of this laboratory was just a young and inexperienced rookie. The entire floor was completely empty. Not a single person could be seen. There were only a few multifunctional robots driving motors and carrying equipment. They buzzed through the corridors and the passageways on both sides. Even with the Xia City branch's vigorous support, the installation of various equipment was far from complete. Many spaces were still empty, or perhaps only a small portion of them had been completed. The only places that were truly in use were the warehouse where the 2 boxes of components were stored, as well as Luo Nan's current workspace. This wasn't the first time the 3 of them had come here. They walked inside with familiarity. Soon, they saw Luo Nan's figure at the end of the passageway on the right. However, this young genius who was famous for his mental senses didn't seem to have discovered their arrival. Luo Nan was standing in the middle of a pile of mechanical arms. He held an electronic pen in his hand and drew in the middle of the work area. Following his movements, a small portion of the dozen or so mechanical arms that were distributed within the space of over 100 square meters were flexing and moving. Each of them had a different division of labor. Some of them were moving equipment. Some of them were assembling and dismantling components. Some of them were even brazenly welding. It caused sparks to flicker within the work area. Qin Yikuan and the others watched with twitching eyelids. Xie Junping was a bit stupefied. Does he really want to use this place as a factory? Shui Lei turned his head to look all around. How come I don't see worker Zhai? Qin Yikuan answered, Worker Zhai is working overtime today. He didn't come. Shui Lei turned his head in shock. He nearly twisted his neck. Hey, is he operating it by himself? Qin Yikuan grinned. There's a military-grade AI here. According to Worker Zhai, it's quite easy to use. It should be. It felt fine when I came over in the afternoon. Then the afternoon ended up like this. The corners of Shui Lei's eyes twitched. He stared fixedly at the figure within the forest of mechanical arms. He confirmed that there was no immediate danger before sweeping a glance at the clock to the side. The clock showed that Luo Nan had been working continuously for 7 hours. In other words, he had skipped at least half of this morning's classes. He's really gone mad. Speaking of which, is he going to use his mental senses to cheat on the final exam? If I had this ability a few years ago, I would have flown away a long time ago. Xie Junping blurted out a sentence, but he soon shifted the focus of his attention. That headband. Is it that extraordinaire? Yeah, it's the one from Jin Tong. Shui Lei confirmed Xie Junping's guess. The item they were discussing was fixed to a mechanical arm in front of Luo Nan. Its appearance was very unremarkable. If one didn't have a fixed view of it, it would have been mixed up with the many equipment components in the surroundings. Actually, Xie Junping didn't have a clear concept of the power of extraordinaires. However, this didn't prevent him from feeling deep veneration for this spoils of war that had been dyed with the blood of the world's top figures. Of course, he felt even more respect for the victor who obtained this spoils of war. I really didn't see it back then. Hey! Before Xie Junping could finish speaking, the headband that had attracted everyone's attention was pulled by the mechanical arm. It was placed squarely on top of Luo Nan's head. Xie Junping and the other 2 all saw it. The headband, which was originally quite wide, clearly shrank the moment it was placed on top of Luo Nan's head. The headband fit perfectly on Luo Nan's forehead. It fit perfectly, as if it was custom-made for Luo Nan. Luo Nan tossed away the electronic pen in his hand right after the headband was placed in place. This was like a signal. The surrounding dozen or so mechanical arms twisted their joints, pushing components and modules from various directions before Luo Nan. Then they began to equip themselves. The miniature energy furnace, chest and abdomen armor, the 4 limbs integrated modules, and other main structures had already undergone many adjustments. They were completely compatible with Luo Nan's figure. It only took 2 seconds to complete. Other parts such as the survival system, mounted weapons, and so on were put on his body one after another. In the blink of an eye, a fully armed deep blue walker appeared before their eyes. TSK. It's like watching a movie. A remake of Iron Man? It looks like it, right? It's just that its color is a bit plain, and it's on the skinny side. Compared to the relaxed attitudes of the 2 youngsters, Qin Yikuan, who was a professional, saw things a bit more. Strictly speaking, this exoskeleton equipment was slimmer than the standard version. Luo Nan should have removed a portion of the mounted equipment and even some parts of the armor. No matter what his goal was, this sort of modification was far too daring for a highly integrated and relatively mature combat platform. In actual combat. Before he could finish his thought, a buzzing vibrating sound rang within the workshop. This was the sign of the miniature energy furnace starting to heat up. The engine's power was rapidly rising. "Hey, test the machine here." The second half of Xie Juanping's words were shattered by the explosive sound of an explosion. A gale blew in front of the eyes of the three onlookers. The mechanical arms in the work area swayed back and forth. The idle components on the floor and stage were blown into a mess. The three of them were able to capture the trajectory of the movement. But by the time they turned their heads, the exoskeleton armor had already come to a stop on the other side of the large room. The wall that had just been painted was behind it. Chapter 591. He didn't. At most, he missed by 10 centimeters. And he even turned around. There was no need to talk about Shui Lei's eyesight, but he felt a bit bitter in his mouth. This is the support of the exoskeleton. Luo Nan's displacement process of extreme static, extreme movement, and extreme stillness was too barbaric and direct, even though it was the least pressure. He had already awakened, and he had used the 9 orifices and 6 roots technique to stabilize the foundation of his body. If it were an ordinary person, they would have suffered from cerebral ischemia, internal organs would have been displaced, and tendons would have been fractured. But this kind of barbarity would be the ultimate impact and lethality in actual combat. Shui Nan pondered to himself. He could barely react to this speed and impact. He wouldn't be killed in an instant, but he would be in a state where he was wide open for 3 rounds at most. No technique would be of any use at that time. He could completely imagine the consequences of falling to the ground. Shui Lei understood more and more now that Gym Master Xiao had painstakingly transferred his energy to human-computer interaction. Although he had gone to the simulation chamber to play a few rounds these past few days, his progress in the real world was clearly lagging behind. He needed to have a greater sense of urgency in the future. Shui Lei felt that the same situation was a spur, but Qin Yikuan felt that it was more realistic. The exoskeleton emitted a buzzing sound of electricity. It was dense and not noisy. On one hand, it displayed a good body condition. On the other hand, it seemed to have a special mode of action. And at this time, he felt a slight itch on his skin that had yet to dissipate. It was as if he had been struck by static electricity. He looked at Luo Nan's feet. There were no traces of friction at all when he stopped and braked. He immediately understood. Electromagnetic fields. Speaking of which, the Deep Blue platform already has such a mature application. He had teamed up with God for some time. He had seen Maglev before, but he had never seen Luo Nan spin through the void like this. There was not a single trace of smoke and fire in the microcontrol effect. Luo Nan was certainly inferior to a professional soldier in terms of operating skills. This kind of effect was reflected in the transmission or control system. The two professionals each had their own thoughts. Xie Junping, an amateur, only looked at appearances. He saw that the outer layer of Luo Nan's body seemed to have a layer of flickering electricity circulating around it. He heard Qin Yikuan mention electromagnetic fields. He immediately thought of the information he had heard from Shui Lei and the others these past few days. He slapped his thigh. Releasing magnetism and discharging electricity. Could it be Jin Tong's unique skill? Is this headband hiding that secret manual? Xie Juanping's idea came out of nowhere, but it was just right. Shui Lei and Qin Yikuan were both stupefied to the side. Suddenly, they had the feeling of realization that something like this was possible. Speaking of which, Luo Nan had brought out quite a few things during this period of time. The cage theory could be said to be a consistent accumulation, but the many days of debugging and remodeling high-precision equipment allowed him to have a nose and eyes. Luo Nan had the mysterious flavor of an omnipotent capable person. Of course, Xie Junping was just making a wild guess, but it was also true. Only now did Luo Nan notice the three of them coming over. He stopped the experiment, took off the helmet, and walked over step by step, still wearing the headband. Although Xie Junping was a typical second-generation rich kid, he had very few opportunities to come into close contact with deep blue walkers. He immediately stepped forward, rubbed, and satisfied his craving. At the same time, he didn't forget to verify the hole in his brain, Nanster, inside this headband. Luo Nan smiled at Xie Junping. He actually admitted it directly. It's more or less a reference to Jin Tong's model. It's an extraordinary power of electromagnetism. It's also the most universal ability that can be grasped at this stage. Hey, there's really something inside. It's yet to be excavated. Luo Nan used his fingertips to tap the headband, emitting muffled popping sounds. This attracted the gazes of the three to focus on the headband. But then he sighed, it's a pity that I can't use this mode for too long with the current strength of my fleshly body. Don't even think about using it in actual combat. I can only use it as a weight-bearing exercise. I can also use it as an experimental machine to verify a few ideas. It's already very strong, okay. Xue Lei had a relatively good understanding of the strength of Luo Nan's body. Even if I can't use that mode just now as my normal state, the short burst of a few dozen seconds is still extremely terrifying. If I'm paired with a blade, I'm dead for sure. Luo Nan still shook his head. If I'm up against an extraordinary, my speed still won't be able to display any advantage. If I were to face them head-on, not to mention anything else, just Jin Tong would be able to shatter both the machine and the person. I'm dead for sure. Xue Lei couldn't hold back from ridiculing. Who told you to go up against an extraordinary? Have you been training with Ghost Eye for the past 2 days? Shouldn't you be increasing your confidence? Luo Nan laughed and didn't continue this topic. Xie Junping turned to look at Qin Yikuan and asked in a low voice, speaking of which, hasn't he been under a bit of pressure lately? Qin Yikuan could only shake his head. Luo Nan pressed against his ear at this time and received a report from the AI. Oh, the parts have been delivered? Xue Lei grinned, 2 whole boxes, over 1,300 kilograms in weight. You want these toys? Don't tell me you want to verify that headband. Luo Nan knew that this was probably the easiest reason for people to accept. Right now, many people expressed curiosity towards the various theories he released. They even questioned their origins. Ree, who was far away on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, used this as a breakthrough point to fabricate rumors to disgust him. Luo Nan could obviously ignore this. With his current status, he already had the qualifications to disregard all of this. In all these years, no one had ever asked where Jin Tong's abilities came from. However, being able to give people a basic direction was always a bit better than making random guesses. At the very least, his current remodeling of the deep blue platform wasn't wrong in saying this. Luo Nan didn't want to deliberately lie to Xue Lei and his other friends. He didn't give a direct answer. He didn't admit nor deny. After a laugh, he changed the topic. It just so happens that I've run out of materials. With you guys replenishing these, I'll finish the experiments at hand in a spurt of energy. Tonight. Oh, I'll use this weekend as well. Qin Yikuan furrowed his brows. You're not going home? Yeah. 2 days might not even be enough. Hey, hold on. Xue Lei actually recalled the contents of Tian Qi's phone call. He repeated the matter of the so-called Mystic Arts Theme Week to Luo Nan in a few words. The Mystic Arts Research Society will be coming over tomorrow to set up the venue. Luo Nan didn't take this seriously. His response was very dull. Let's do it. After all, the property rights are in their hands. Won't it disturb you? Luo Nan had already considered this point. It's fine to just seal off the 5th to 7th floors. I asked Sister Yuan to set up a separate system. It's not the same system as the academy, so it's not a problem to keep it clean. Let's do this for now. I'll talk to them when I have time. The 7th floor was the energy center and the database. The 6th floor was the main body of the laboratory. The 5th floor was the training field. The modified body needed to undergo a more comprehensive examination there. This was the space that Luo Nan had circled out for himself. There were some problems with the legal principles, but he was willing to communicate with the Mystic Arts Research Society. The price could be discussed. Before his credit limit was maxed out, this bit of money really didn't count for much. Xie Junping volunteered, Tang Yi isn't here, so it's easier to talk to the other members of the society. I'll take care of this matter. Okay. Then I'll have to trouble Brother Ping. Oh, there's one more thing. Luo Nan suddenly thought of a key point. He turned his head to size things up and used the electromagnetic technique that he had just learned a few days ago. He extended his hand and grabbed the electronic pen that he had just tossed down. At the same time, he opened up his work area and brought up the holographic structural diagram of gear. They can mess around with the furnishings of the building, but I don't want them to destroy the overall structure of the room. Especially the second, third, and fifth floors above ground. There's also the first and second floors below ground, as well as that large courtyard. He circled 7 or 8 relatively important locations as he spoke. The main structure here is where the essence of my mother's design lies. So, Xie Junping understood tacitly. He patted his chest and guaranteed, I'll keep an eye on them. Only then did he seriously look at the structural diagram. Unfortunately, his eyes were blurry from looking at it, so he couldn't see anything. He just mumbled to strengthen his memory, they can't be destroyed. Otherwise, they'll destroy the layout. How does it have anything to do with feng shui? That's not what I meant. Luo Nan didn't mind. Instead, he laughed, if we're talking about feng shui, it really does look a bit like it. After all, building here involves the philosophy of man and nature. It's impossible to bypass these things. It was already quite late, and it was already past 6 o'clock. Since Luo Nan was going to work overtime, Xue Lei and the others didn't want to disturb him any longer. They said their goodbyes and left. Luo Nan watched them leave. He stood in place and adjusted his breathing, calming his mind once more. Only then did he walk back to the middle of the cluster of mechanical arms. He unloaded the body that had just gone through a round of testing. He continued to draw lines and diagrams based on the results of the test, making preparations for the important experiment that was about to happen soon. The lines within the work area were complex, but the virtual brain system interface was already open within the brain domain that the outside world couldn't see. The equipment interface and the large user manual shone before his eyes, providing him with the most direct guidance. Right now Luo Nan already understood that the main function of the virtual brain system was to manufacture the dynamo core or the psychic core. Moreover, it was to carry out the manufacturing and debugging of the relevant supporting equipment for these precise and peculiar creations. Therefore, the vast majority of the contents of the system's user manual revolved around materials, manufacturing, installation, and debugging. On the other hand, the fundamental nomological foundation of the dynamo core and the psychic core, the configuration, wasn't written too much. It was just a classic example like the fortress. There were also operational instructions, judgment tests, and so on during the conversion process. Of course, this wasn't a good thing for Luo Nan to further delve into the nomological principles of configuration. But the technical guidance that was extremely close to the practical application level was extremely in line with his current needs. Especially since Luo Nan already possessed the psychic core of the external neuron. He also had the headband as the core conversion equipment. After building this laboratory, all he needed to do was transfer the design ideas within the virtual brain system out. He could compare and verify them one by one. Of course, this was accompanied by a large amount of mistakes and losses. Luo Nan didn't care about this anymore. After he transformed into Teacher Luo, he received a commission for the usage of the SVIP model. He also received a credit limit that rose with the tide. These were enough to support his willfulness. Luo Nan was fed with an enormous amount of trial and error opportunities. Even though Luo Nan couldn't be considered a developer in the relevant field for the time being, he was getting closer and closer to a qualified technician. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.